What if the most popular cartoon of the last 25 years was never really a kid's show at all? I mean, think about it. Really think about it. A cartoon about a sea sponge who lives in a pineapple, works at a fast food restaurant, and annoys his neighbor. That's the pitch. That's what Nickelodeon greenlit in 1999. And somehow, that show became a cultural phenomenon that's produced over 330 episodes across 16 seasons, 3 theatrical films, multiple spin-offs, and more internet memes than any other piece of media in human history. But here's the thing that's been keeping me up at night. The deeper you look at SpongeBob SquarePants, the more you start to realize that something else is going on underneath all of it. There are layers to this show that most people never notice on a casual watch. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. And tonight, we're going to go through all of it. Every conspiracy theory, every fan theory, every dark interpretation, hidden meaning, and production secret that the creators either buried on purpose or accidentally left in plain sight for us to find decades later. We're talking about the theory that the main characters represent the 7 deadly sins. The theory that Bikini Bottom exists because of nuclear weapons testing. The theory that SpongeBob himself is on the autism spectrum. The theory that the show was supposed to end in 2004 and everything after that is essentially fan fiction that Nickelodeon forced into existence against the creators' wishes. We're going deep tonight, 3 hours deep. So if you're watching this late at night, get comfortable, grab a blanket, maybe turn the lights down, because we're going to be here for a while. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. If you haven't subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these for you. Just hit that button and come along for the ride. Now, I want to start with something that most people treat as a fun little trivia fact, but is actually way more significant than anyone gives it credit for. And that's the question of where Bikini Bottom actually is. Because the answer to that question changes everything about how you interpret this entire show. So here's what we know. The show takes place in a location called Bikini Bottom. It's an underwater city. We see it constantly on the show. This colorful little town with houses made out of anchors and tires and rocks, a fast food restaurant shaped like a lobster trap, and right in the middle of it all, a pineapple. And for most of us watching as kids, that was just the setting. It was a silly underwater world where fish walked around and talked and went to work and did people things. We didn't question it. We didn't need to. But there's a real place connected to this fictional city. And the connection isn't subtle. It's right there in the name, Bikini Atoll. A coral reef in the Marshall Islands in the Pacific Ocean. And if that name sounds familiar, it should. Because between 1946 and 1958, the United States government detonated 67 nuclear weapons on and around Bikini Atoll. 67, including a test on March 1st, 1954, known as Castle Bravo, which produced an explosion equivalent to roughly 1,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs. The indigenous people of Bikini Atoll were forcibly relocated. They were told it was temporary. It wasn't. To this day, the radiation levels on those islands are too high for human habitation. The Bikinian people can't go home. They might never be able to go home. And here's the thing that got me when I first learned about this. SpongeBob SquarePants doesn't just take place near Bikini Atoll. It takes place at the bottom of Bikini Atoll. Bikini Bottom. The name is literal. And this isn't some fan interpretation that's reading too much into a coincidence. In December 2024, longtime SpongeBob writer and Plankton voice actor Mr. Lawrence confirmed the fan theory that Bikini Bottom's origins are tied to nuclear testing. He confirmed it. And what he said was even darker than the theory itself, because he implied that the original plan for the show's mythology was that the human world above the surface had been destroyed, or at least existed in some kind of post-apocalyptic state. Let that settle for a second. The colorful, happy, absurd world of SpongeBob SquarePants might exist because of nuclear devastation. The talking fish, the sentient sea creatures, the fact that they have a functioning society with restaurants and schools and television sets, all of it could be the result of radiation-induced mutation. And you know what? If you go back and watch the show with this in your head, you start noticing things. The explosions in SpongeBob have a very specific shape. They look like mushroom clouds. Almost every single explosion in the show mimics the shape of the actual underwater nuclear detonation photographs from the Bikini Atoll tests. That's not random. And here's what really gets me. One of the bombs tested at Bikini Atoll was detonated underwater. The photograph of that explosion, this massive column of water shooting up with a dome-shaped cloud spreading across the surface, If you put that photograph next to an explosion from the show, the resemblance is uncomfortable. And I've been going back and forth on this for weeks now. Is this intentional? Was Stephen Hillenberg, a marine biologist who spent years studying ocean life and understood better than most people what nuclear testing did to marine ecosystems, was he deliberately setting his cartoon in the aftermath of one of the worst environmental disasters in human history? Or is it a coincidence that just happens to line up perfectly? I think the answer is more complicated than either option, and we'll come back to that. But first, I need to tell you about the man who created this show, because understanding Stephen Hillenberg is the key to understanding every conspiracy theory we're going to talk about tonight. Stephen McDaniel. Hillenberg was born on August 21st, 1961, in Lawton, Oklahoma. And from a very young age, he was fascinated by two things: the ocean and art. Those two passions would define his entire life. He didn't go straight into animation. That's not how his story goes. He went to Humboldt State University and got a degree in natural resource planning with an emphasis on marine resources. He was a scientist first. After graduating, he took a job at the Orange County Marine Institute in Dana Point, California, where he worked as a marine biology educator. And this is where the SpongeBob story really begins, even though nobody knew it at the time. While working at the Marine Institute, Hillenberg created an educational comic book called The Intertidal Zone. It was a teaching tool, basically an illustrated guide to tide pool animals, designed to help visitors understand the creatures they were looking at. And the characters in this comic were anthropomorphic sea creatures. One of them was called Bob the Sponge. Bob the Sponge. He looked different from the SpongeBob we know. He was drawn like an actual sea sponge, more blobby and organic. Not the rectangular kitchen sponge shape that the character would eventually take on. But the DNA was there. The concept of taking real marine biology and wrapping it in cartoon characters and humor that was already forming in Hillenberg's mind while he was teaching kids about tide pools. After about 2 years of teaching, Hillenberg made a decision that changed everything. He enrolled at the California Institute of the Arts, better known as CalArts, to pursue animation. He studied under Jules Engel, the founding director of CalArts' experimental animation program, who Hillenberg would later call his art dad. Engel was impressed by the Intertidal Zone and accepted Hillenberg into the program. In 1992, Hillenberg graduated with a Master of Fine Arts in Experimental Animation. He got a job working on Rocko's Modern Life at Nickelodeon, where he served as a director and writer. And that's where he met Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants. Kenny had been doing a minor character voice on Rocko's Modern Life, and when Hillenberg started developing his own show, he heard something in Kenny's voice that clicked. According to the story, Hillenberg told Nickelodeon executives that he'd found his SpongeBob and didn't want anyone else to audition. The network pushed back, because that's what networks do. They wanted options. But Hillenberg shut it down. He knew what he wanted. And I think this tells you something fundamental about Stephen Hillenberg. He had a vision. It was specific. It was personal. It came from his real experience as a marine biologist, from his years studying ocean life, from his time teaching kids about the natural world. SpongeBob SquarePants wasn't cooked up in a boardroom. It wasn't designed by committee. It was one guy's deeply personal combination of everything he loved: marine biology, animation, absurdist humor, and genuine warmth. And that's why the show worked the way it did in those early seasons. The first episode, Help Wanted, aired on May 1st, 1999, right after the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards broadcast. The official series debut came later, on July 17th, 1999, with Bubble Stand and Ripped Pants. And right from that very first episode, you could feel that this show was different. There was a specificity to the humor, a density to the visual gags, and an underlying warmth that separated it from everything else on children's television at the time. SpongeBob was optimistic without being naive. The show was silly without being stupid. And underneath all the absurdity, there was this layer of real emotion and real thematic depth that you didn't fully appreciate until you were older. Which brings me to the first major conspiracy theory that we need to talk about. And it's probably the most famous one, the 7 deadly sins theory. Okay, so this theory has been floating around the internet for years. I first heard about it maybe 10 years ago, and at first I thought it was a stretch. But the more I sat with it, the more I watched the show with this lens, the more I started to think there might actually be something to it. The theory goes like this. Each of the 7 main characters in SpongeBob SquarePants represents one of the 7 deadly sins from Christian theology. And once you hear the assignments, They're hard to argue with. Patrick's star is sloth. And I mean, come on. This one writes itself. Patrick literally lives under a rock. He does nothing all day. He sleeps constantly. He has no job, no ambitions, no responsibilities. There's an episode, Big Pink Loser, which first aired on November 16th, 2001, as Season 2, Episode 3A, where Patrick wins an award for doing absolutely nothing longer than anyone else. The show gave him a trophy for being lazy. That's not subtext. That's just text. Patrick embodies sloth so completely that you almost can't imagine him representing anything else. Squidward Tentacles is wrath. Now, some people push back on this one. They say Squidward is more of a representation of envy, because he's jealous of SpongeBob's happiness. But I don't think that's right. Squidward's defining characteristic isn't jealousy. It's anger. He's constantly irritated, constantly frustrated, constantly hostile toward the world around him. He hates his job. He hates his neighbors. He hates his life. And that rage, that simmering, unrelenting anger at everything, that's wrath. Not explosive, violent wrath, but the quiet, corrosive kind. The kind that eats you from the inside. Mr. Krabs is greed. This one doesn't even need explaining. But I'll explain it anyway because I find the extent of it genuinely fascinating. Eugene H. Krabs loves money more than anything in the world. More than his daughter Pearl. More than his employees. More than basic human or crustacean decency. There are episodes where he literally sells SpongeBob's soul for pocket change. In Born Again Krabs, which aired on October 4th, 2003, as Season 3, Episode 14A, Mr. Krabs is so cheap that he tries to serve a rotten Krabby Patty to a customer rather than waste money throwing it away. He gets sent to Davy Jones's locker and is given a second chance at life. And what does he learn from his brush with death? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He goes right back to being obsessed with money. That's greed, distilled into its purest, most cartoonish form. Plankton is envy. Sheldon J. Plankton's entire existence revolves around wanting what Mr. Krabs has. He doesn't just want a successful restaurant. He wants the Krusty Krab's success specifically. He wants the Krabby Patty formula. Every episode featuring Plankton as the antagonist is, at its core, about envy. He can't stand that Mr. Krabs has something he doesn't. And what makes it even more fitting is that Plankton is tiny. He's the smallest character in the main cast. His entire character is built on feeling small, feeling inadequate, feeling like he deserves more than what he has. That's envy. Sandy Cheeks is pride. Sandra Jennifer Cheeks takes enormous pride in everything she does. Her Texas heritage, her scientific achievements, her karate skills, her physical strength. In Sandy, SpongeBob and the Worm, which aired on October 12th, 2001, as Season 2, Episode 20B, Sandy is so confident in her own abilities that she insists on fighting an Alaskan bullworm alone, refusing to believe that the creature could be too much for her to handle. Pride in the biblical sense isn't about being proud of your kids or your accomplishments. It's about hubris. It's about believing you're better than everyone else. And Sandy, for all her likability, consistently demonstrates that she believes she's the smartest, toughest, most capable person in any room. That's pride. SpongeBob SquarePants is lust. And I know how that sounds. But hold on. Lust in this context doesn't mean sexual desire. The broader definition of lust is an overwhelming enthusiasm, an excessive passion or desire for something. And SpongeBob is the most excessively enthusiastic character in the history of animation. He loves his job with an intensity that borders on obsession. He loves his friends with a fervor that drives them crazy. He loves jellyfishing. He loves karate. He loves bubble blowing. He loves everything about his life with a consuming, relentless passion. His lust for life is so extreme that it defines every interaction he has. He can't contain it. He can't moderate it. He's consumed by it. And then there's Gary the Snail. Gary is gluttony. And the evidence for this one is actually really clever. Throughout the show, there's a running gag about feeding Gary. SpongeBob is constantly being reminded to feed his pet, or forgetting to feed him, or Gary demanding food. And have you seen this snail, which aired on November 11th, 2005, as Season 4, Episode 3, Gary literally runs away from home because SpongeBob forgot to feed him. The entire episode is about Gary's need to eat. He ends up with an old woman who feeds him constantly, and Gary stays with her purely because she keeps him fed. Food is Gary's primary motivation. That's gluttony. Now, here's where I land on this theory, and I know some people won't agree with me. I don't think Stephen Hillenberg sat down and said, I'm going to make each character represent a deadly sin. I really don't. Hillenberg was a marine biologist and an artist, not a theologian. But I do think the reason these assignments work so well is that the 7 deadly sins are fundamental human personality archetypes. They're the building blocks of character writing. And when you create characters that are distinct, well-defined, and exaggerated for comedic effect, you naturally end up with traits that map onto these archetypes. The fact that it fits so neatly is a testament to how well-crafted these characters are, not necessarily evidence of deliberate religious symbolism. And you know what's interesting? In December 2024, Mr. Lawrence, who voices Plankton and has written multiple episodes, was asked about the 7 deadly sins theory. And his response was basically that while the characters likely have individual distinctions, it may not be as concrete as pairing them with one of the 7 deadly sins. So the creators are aware of the theory, they've heard it, and they're not confirming it, but they're also not shutting it down entirely, which honestly is the perfect response. But here's the thing that I keep coming back to. Whether or not Hillenberg intended it, the theory reveals something important about why these characters work. They're archetypes. They're exaggerated versions of fundamental human traits. And because of that, they're universal. Everyone knows a Patrick. Everyone knows a Squidward. Everyone knows a Mr. Krabs. These characters resonate because they're built on the bedrock of what makes people people, even when those people are fish and sponges and squirrels living underwater. Okay, so let's move to something that I think is even more fascinating than the 7 deadly sins theory. And this one is personal for me because it changed the way I think about the entire show. I'm talking about the theory that SpongeBob SquarePants is on the autism spectrum. Now, I want to be really careful with this one, because talking about real neurodevelopmental conditions through the lens of a fictional cartoon character can go wrong really fast. I don't want to trivialize autism, and I don't want to suggest that being autistic is a punchline. So let me be clear about my perspective. I think this theory, when treated with respect, actually highlights something beautiful about the character and the show. Here's where it started getting real for me. Tom Kenny, who has voiced SpongeBob since the very first episode in 1999, was doing a Q&A at Motor City Comic Con, and a fan who was on the spectrum asked him directly whether SpongeBob was autistic. And Kenny's response was immediate and genuine. He said yes. He said of course SpongeBob is on the spectrum. And then he said something that really stuck with me. He called it SpongeBob's superpower, the same way it was the fan's superpower. And I know some people will say, well, that's just a voice actor's interpretation. It's not the creator's intention. Tom Kenny doesn't get to decide that. And sure, Kenny isn't Stephen Hillenberg, but Kenny has been living with this character for over 25 years. He's performed SpongeBob's voice in hundreds of episodes, 3 movies, and countless promotional appearances. If anyone understands this character on an instinctive level, it's him. And his interpretation isn't coming from nowhere. It's coming from decades of embodying a character whose traits, when you actually list them out, align remarkably well with common characteristics of autism spectrum disorder. Look at the evidence. SpongeBob struggles with social cues. He genuinely doesn't understand when he's annoying people. He takes things extremely literally. He has intense, focused interests, his job as a fry cook being the most obvious one, but also jellyfishing and bubble blowing. He follows routines rigidly and gets deeply distressed when those routines are disrupted. He has difficulty with certain tasks that seem simple to others, most notably driving a boat, while excelling at tasks that require repetitive precision, like flipping Krabby Patties. He experiences emotions intensely, sometimes overwhelmingly. He struggles with transitions and changes in his environment. I've rewatched dozens of episodes specifically looking at this, and once you see it, it's everywhere. The boating school episodes are particularly revealing. SpongeBob aces every written test Mrs. Puff gives him. He knows the material cold, but the moment he has to apply that knowledge in a real-world, unpredictable, sensory overload situation, behind the wheel of a boat, he falls apart every single time. And the show doesn't play this as stupidity. It plays it as anxiety. SpongeBob isn't dumb, he's overwhelmed. Think about his relationship with Patrick. Patrick is SpongeBob's best friend, and their friendship works because Patrick has no social expectations. Patrick doesn't require SpongeBob to read between the lines, to pick up on subtle cues, to behave in socially appropriate ways. Patrick just accepts SpongeBob exactly as he is. and SpongeBob thrives in that relationship precisely because it removes the social pressure that makes other relationships complicated for him. Kenny said in an interview on Mark Maron's podcast that SpongeBob talks to kids on the autism spectrum more than other cartoons do, and I think that's exactly right. This character resonates with neurodivergent viewers because, whether intentionally or not, he represents their experience. The intensity of his interests, the confusion about social rules, the earnestness that other people find exhausting. Those aren't just character quirks. For millions of viewers, those are lived experiences reflected back at them through a yellow cartoon sponge. And the fact that the show never pathologizes these traits, that SpongeBob's differences are presented as part of who he is, not as problems to be fixed, that matters. That matters a lot. Now, I want to connect this to something else, because I think these theories are more related than people realize. Let's talk about the mental illness theory. This is a broader version of the autism theory. It's the idea that each character in SpongeBob represents a different mental health condition. And I want to say up front that I have mixed feelings about this one. Some of the assignments feel insightful. Others feel like they're reducing complex conditions to surface-level stereotypes. But the theory exists, it's popular, and there are elements of it that I think are worth examining. The assignments usually go something like this. SpongeBob has ADHD. Patrick has an intellectual disability. Squidward has depression. Mr. Krabs has narcissistic personality disorder. Sandy has anxiety, or sometimes borderline personality disorder. Plankton has bipolar disorder. And the evidence people point to is the exaggerated behavior of each character. Here's where I think the theory actually has something valuable to say, though. Squidward. Because the idea that Squidward represents depression isn't really a theory. It's practically canon. Squidward Tentacles is one of the most accurate depictions of functional depression in animated television. He goes to work every day. He comes home. He has hobbies that he derives almost no pleasure from. He's surrounded by people who are happy and can't understand why he isn't. He tries to find meaning in art and music and culture, and those things bring him brief moments of satisfaction that immediately give way to the same underlying emptiness. His house is shaped like an Easter Island head, this stoic, unmovable face staring out at a world it has no interest in engaging with. And here's what gets me about Squidward. The show doesn't just use his depression as a punchline, although it does use it for comedy. It also genuinely explores it. There are moments throughout the series where Squidward's sadness is treated with real tenderness. Band Geeks, which aired on September 7th, 2001, as Season 2, Episode 15B, is the most famous example. In that episode, Squidward enters a marching band competition against his lifelong rival, Squilliam Fancyson. Everything goes wrong. The band is terrible. Squidward's humiliation seems inevitable. And then, at the final performance, SpongeBob and the rest of Bikini Bottom come together and deliver this incredible rendition of Sweet Victory. And for the first and only time in the series up to that point, Squidward wins. He just wins. No twist, no punchline, no reversal. Just Squidward, on stage, finally getting the moment he's been chasing for years. And the show lets him have it. That episode has a 9.8 rating on IMDb. It's the highest rated episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. It was written by C.H. Greenblatt, Aaron Springer, and Meriwether Williams, and directed by Aaron Springer. And I think part of why it resonates so deeply is that by that point, the audience has spent dozens of episodes watching Squidward lose, watching him be humiliated, watching him fail at the things he cares about most. And when he finally succeeds, even if it's not through his own effort, it feels earned. It feels cathartic, because we've been living with his depression. We've been watching it grind him down, and for 11 glorious minutes, it lifts. I actually have a theory about why the Squidward depression reading works so well, and I've never heard anyone else bring it up. I think Stephen Hillenberg understood something about depression that most writers don't. He understood that depressed people aren't sad all the time. They're frustrated. They're angry. They're resentful. They feel like they deserve more than what they have, and they can't figure out why the world isn't giving it to them. Squidward doesn't sit in his house crying. He sits in his house playing clarinet badly and blaming everyone else for his misery. That's depression. That's what it actually looks like for a lot of people. Not sadness, irritation, constant, bone-deep irritation at a world that refuses to cooperate with your vision of how things should be. And you know what's wild? The show eventually acknowledged this reading directly. In Are You Happy Now?, which aired in 2012 as part of Season 8, the main plot literally centers on Squidward being clinically depressed. He has no happiest memory. He can't think of a single moment in his life that brought him joy. And the episode includes scenes that were genuinely controversial because they seem to reference suicidal ideation. There's a moment where Squidward reaches up toward a rope in a closet, and the audience holds their breath because we think we know what's happening. Then it turns out he's reaching for a birdcage. But the implication was there. The show went there, even if it pulled back at the last second. And that's not the only time SpongeBob went dark. In One Course Meal, which aired in 2010 as part of Season 7, Plankton is so tormented by Mr. Krabs' psychological abuse that he lies down in the middle of the road to get run over. He's attempting to end his life. In a kids' show on Nickelodeon, that actually aired. And this is what I mean when I say there are layers to this show that most people never notice. This isn't the version of SpongeBob that exists in most people's memories. Most people remember the silliness, the absurdity, the "I'm ready" catchphrase, and the jellyfishing and the rainbow hands imagination meme. But underneath that, there are moments of genuine darkness that the show didn't shy away from. Let's shift gears and talk about something that ties directly into why the show went dark in ways it didn't in the early seasons. And this is a theory that's been debated by fans for over 20 years. The theory that SpongeBob SquarePants was supposed to end with the first movie. Here's the timeline. Seasons 1 through 3 of SpongeBob aired between 1999 and 2004. Stephen Hillenberg was directly involved in all of them as creator, showrunner, and guiding creative force. After completing Season 3, Hillenberg halted production of the show to focus on making the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, which was released in November 2004. And according to Hillenberg himself, his intention was for the movie to serve as the finale. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that they had about 60 episodes, and that was probably as many as Nickelodeon really needed. The movie ends with SpongeBob becoming the manager of the Krusty Krab 2. It's a satisfying conclusion. SpongeBob achieves his dream. The story feels complete. And for Hillenberg, it was complete. He was done. He wanted to move on to other projects. But Nickelodeon wasn't done. Not even close. SpongeBob SquarePants was, and still is, the most valuable property in Nickelodeon's history. The merchandise alone generates billions of dollars. The show's ratings were massive. Walking away from that kind of revenue isn't something a corporation does willingly. So Nickelodeon continued the show without Hillenberg as showrunner. He stepped back, and Paul Tibbitt took over as showrunner starting with Season 4. And this is where the conspiracy theory gets interesting, because the quality of the show changed. Noticeably. Dramatically. Most fans agree that Seasons 1 through 3, what people call the Hillenberg era, or the Golden Age, are vastly superior to what came after. The humor was sharper. The characters were more nuanced. The emotional moments hit harder. The animation was more detailed. Everything about those first 3 seasons feels different from what came after the movie. Season 4 is generally considered okay by most fans. There are good episodes. There are bad episodes. But by Seasons 5, 6, and 7, the consensus among the fan base is that the show had lost something essential. And the word that comes up most often when people describe what happened, flanderization. Flanderization is a term that comes from The Simpsons, specifically from the character Ned Flanders, who started as a friendly, well-meaning neighbor and was gradually reduced to nothing but his religious beliefs. It means taking a single trait of a character and exaggerating it until that trait becomes the entire character. And that's exactly what happened to the SpongeBob cast in the post-movie era. SpongeBob went from being enthusiastic and earnest to being annoyingly childish and sometimes cruel. Patrick went from being lovably dumb to being aggressively stupid and mean-spirited. Mr. Krabs went from being cheap to being a psychopath who would literally sell someone's soul for a nickel. Squidward went from being a grumpy neighbor with depth to being a punching bag who existed solely to suffer. The characters became flatter. The humor became meaner. The emotional core that made the early seasons so special was largely absent. And I want to be fair here. There are good episodes in the post-movie era. There are great ones even. But the overall quality dropped enough that it became one of the most discussed topic in the SpongeBob fandom. You know something has shifted when an entire community develops terminology to describe the change. Pre-movie SpongeBob, post-movie SpongeBob. Those phrases exist because the difference is real. So here's the conspiracy theory version of this. Some fans believe that Hillenberg's absence isn't just a matter of creative quality. They believe that the post-movie episodes exist in a fundamentally different universe. That the movie was the canonical ending of SpongeBob's story, and everything after it is essentially non-canon. SpongeBob became the manager. His journey was complete, and the episodes that came after are essentially a corporate product that has nothing to do with Hillenberg's original vision. Now, I want to push back on part of this, because it's actually more complicated than most people think. There's a widespread belief that Hillenberg himself said the movie was the chronological end of the timeline, that it takes place after all the episodes. But that claim has been traced back to an unsourced Wikipedia edit that was made years ago. People saw it on Wikipedia, treated it as fact, and it spread through the internet like wildfire. But there's no confirmed interview where Hillenberg says the movie is the chronological endpoint of the show's timeline. What Hillenberg did say is that he wanted the movie to be the series finale, not the chronological finale. The series finale, there's a difference. He wanted it to be the last thing they made. He didn't necessarily mean it took place last in the story's timeline. This is a distinction that most people miss, and I think it matters. But here's what isn't in dispute. Hillenberg wanted to stop. He believed the story was told, and Nickelodeon forced the show to continue without him. That part is real, and the impact of that decision on the show's quality, the characters' depth, and the creative direction of one of the most beloved animated series ever made is something that we'll never fully be able to measure. Because we'll never see the version of SpongeBob SquarePants that exists in the timeline where Hillenberg's wishes were respected. And this connects to something else that I've been thinking about. Remember what I said earlier about the nuclear theory and the show's underlying darkness? I think the reason those dark elements work so well in the early seasons is precisely because Hillenberg was in control. He was a marine biologist. He understood the real ocean. He knew that the real underwater world is beautiful and brutal and strange in ways that most people never see. And he channeled that understanding into a show that was silly on the surface, but had genuine depth underneath. When Hillenberg stepped away, the new creative team tried to recreate that depth, but without the same understanding of what made it work. So instead of organic darkness, hidden jokes that you caught on the fifth rewatch, thematic complexity woven so subtly into the fabric of the show that kids never noticed it, they went for surface-level shock value. Episodes like One Course Meal aren't dark in the same way that the Bikini Atoll connection is dark. They're dark in a blunt, uncomfortable way that feels more like a mistake than an artistic choice. Okay, so let me tell you about something that I went down a complete rabbit hole on while researching this video. And honestly, I'm still not sure how I feel about it, but I need to share it with you because it's one of the most persistent pieces of SpongeBob internet lore, and it connects to the show's relationship with darkness in a really unsettling way. I'm talking about the Squidward suicide creepypasta. Now, if you're not familiar with creepypasta, it's basically internet horror fiction, short scary stories shared on forums and websites. And one of the most famous creepypastas ever written is about SpongeBob SquarePants. It's called Squidward Suicide, and it was first posted on the 7chan Paranormal board on April 6th, 2010. The story is told from the perspective of an alleged Nickelodeon intern who claims that the production team received a tape of what was supposed to be the season 4 premiere, and as they watch it, the episode becomes increasingly disturbing, featuring hyper-realistic images of Squidward crying, footage of real violence, and eventually Squidward taking his own life. It's fiction. I want to be absolutely clear about that. It's a made-up story. There is no lost episode. There is no secret tape. It's creepypasta. It's the kind of horror fiction that the internet excels at producing. But here's what makes it interesting from a conspiracy theory standpoint. The fact that someone chose SpongeBob SquarePants as the subject of a horror story says something about the show's place in our culture. SpongeBob is, for most people, the embodiment of innocence and joy. It's a happy show about a happy character, And there's something deeply unsettling about taking that innocence and corrupting it. That contrast between what SpongeBob represents and what the creepypasta does to it is precisely what makes the story effective as horror. It works because we love SpongeBob. It hurts because we associate him with childhood and safety. And here's the part that really blew my mind. The show itself acknowledged the creepypasta. In 2019, SpongeBob SquarePants aired an episode called SpongeBob in Random Land. And in one scene, Squidward opens a door and sees a version of himself with red, hyper-realistic eyes. It's a direct reference to the Squidward suicide creepypasta. The animators put it in on purpose. They knew the story, they knew the meme, and they referenced it in the actual show. A Nickelodeon cartoon referenced internet horror fiction about one of its characters dying. That's surreal on a level that I'm still processing. And you know what? Let me sit with that for a second, because it connects to something bigger. The relationship between SpongeBob and internet culture is unlike anything else in the history of television. No show has generated more memes than SpongeBob SquarePants. Not The Office, not The Simpsons, not anything. SpongeBob is the undisputed king of meme culture. And the reason for that is something I find genuinely fascinating. Think about the mocking SpongeBob meme. You know the one. The image of SpongeBob standing in a chicken-like pose with the text typed in alternating upper and lower case. This is what you look like. That image comes from Little Yellow Book, Season 9, Episode 4, which aired in 2012. SpongeBob is mimicking a chicken after Squidward reads his diary aloud. That scene sat there for 5 years before someone on Twitter, a user named @OGBeard, posted a screenshot of it on May 4th, 2017, with a caption about staring at kids who stare at you. And within weeks, it was everywhere. Everywhere. It became one of the most used meme formats on the entire internet. People used it for political commentary, for personal jokes, for workplace humor, for literally every context imaginable. And that's just one meme. There's the Imagination Rainbow Hands meme from Idiot Box. There's the Emma Head Out meme from a Season 2 episode. There's the This Is Fine burning house, except it's Patrick sitting calmly while everything burns around him. There's the tired SpongeBob at the desk. The confused Mr. Krabs. The list goes on and on and on. And I think the reason SpongeBob became the foundation of internet meme culture is the same reason the 7 Deadly Sins theory works. These characters are universal archetypes. SpongeBob's facial expressions, his body language, the exaggerated animation style of the show, it all translates perfectly to the shorthand communication that memes require. When you see mocking SpongeBob, you don't need context. You don't need to know the episode. You don't need to have watched the show. The image communicates an emotion, a tone, instantly. And that's because the show's visual storytelling is so good that individual frames carry meaning on their own. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't a light video. We're going deep. And the next theory I want to talk about is one that I actually struggled with whether to include, because it requires talking about something that happened in real life that's genuinely sad. But I think it's important context for understanding the show and its legacy. I'm talking about Stephen Hillenberg's diagnosis with ALS and what it meant for SpongeBob SquarePants. In March 2017, Hillenberg publicly announced that he had been diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also known as ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. ALS is a progressive neurodegenerative disease that affects nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord. There is no cure. It's terminal. When making the announcement, Hillenberg said something that I think about all the time. He said, and I'm paraphrasing to respect his words, that anyone who knows him knows he will continue to work on SpongeBob and his other passions for as long as he is able. And he did. He kept working. He stayed involved with the show until he physically couldn't anymore. Stephen Hillenberg died on November 26, 2018. He was 57 years old. And the internet's response to his death was unlike anything I'd seen before, or have seen since for a showrunner or creator. It wasn't just sadness. It was mourning. Real mourning. People shared their favorite episodes, their favorite quotes, their memories of watching SpongeBob as kids. Tribute art flooded social media. The hashtag about his passing trended for days. And what struck me about all of it was the specificity of the grief. People weren't mourning a celebrity in the abstract way we usually mourn celebrities. They were mourning someone who had shaped their sense of humor, their worldview, their childhood. Stephen Hillenberg didn't just create a cartoon. He created the cartoon that defined a generation. And then the Super Bowl happened. In February 2019, just weeks after Hillenberg's death, the Super Bowl 53 halftime show took place in Atlanta. And in the weeks before the game, a petition had gathered over 1.2 million signatures asking for Sweet Victory, the song from Band Geeks, to be performed at halftime as a tribute to Hillenberg. Think about that. Over 1 million people signed a petition to play a song from a cartoon at the biggest televised event in America. That's how much SpongeBob meant to people. And what actually happened was, I think, one of the most disappointing moments in SpongeBob's cultural history. The halftime show, headlined by Maroon 5, featured a brief clip of the Sweet Victory sequence on the stadium screen, about 15 seconds worth, which then transitioned into Travis Scott performing Sicko Mode. The SpongeBob clip wasn't a tribute. It was a teaser, a bait and switch, and the backlash was immediate and intense. People felt used. They felt like the NFL and Maroon 5 had exploited the fan petition to generate buzz for the halftime show without actually delivering what was promised. I remember watching it live and just feeling deflated. And look, I know it's a football game. I know it's a halftime show. But Hillenberg had just died. Millions of people had organized around this idea that maybe, just maybe, the biggest stage in American entertainment could take a moment to honor the man who created SpongeBob. And instead, they got 15 seconds of animation used as a segue into a Travis Scott song. It felt wrong. It still feels wrong. But here's the thing that this moment revealed. It showed how deeply SpongeBob SquarePants is embedded in our culture. A cartoon about a sea sponge nearly took over the Super Bowl halftime show. The fact that over 1 million people thought it was reasonable to ask for a cartoon tribute at the Super Bowl tells you everything you need to know about what this show means to people. Alright, let me take us somewhere different now, because I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, and I think this is the right moment. Let's talk about the theory that the characters in SpongeBob are all on drugs. Now, I know. I can already hear some of you groaning. This is the lazy theory. This is what people say about every cartoon. And you're right that it's a cliche. People have said this about Winnie the Pooh, Scooby-Doo, and basically every animated show that's even slightly surreal. But the SpongeBob version of this theory is surprisingly detailed. And while I don't think it's what Hillenberg intended, it's interesting enough to walk through. The theory assigns different substances to each character based on their behavior. SpongeBob is on psychedelic mushrooms. His wild imagination, his hallucinations, his ability to see magical things in mundane objects like cardboard boxes and bubbles. All of that is attributed to psilocybin. Patrick is on marijuana. He's lethargic. He's always eating. He lives in a daze of contented confusion. The munchies, the laziness, the cognitive difficulties. It all maps onto the stereotypical stoner character. Squidward is on heroin. His mood swings between euphoria during his creative moments and deep, gray-tone depression the rest of the time. Mr. Krabs is on cocaine. Manic, obsessive, paranoid, driven by an insatiable need for more. The theory even suggests that Mr. Krabs might be the dealer, the one supplying everyone else. And look, I think this theory is mostly nonsense. I really do. SpongeBob is surreal because it's a cartoon made by creative people with backgrounds in experimental animation. The characters behave the way they do because they're cartoon characters in a cartoon world. You don't need drugs to explain why a sponge can regenerate his limbs, or why a squirrel lives underwater in a dome. That's just the show's logic. But I'll say this. The fact that this theory exists tells us something about the show's relationship with absurdism. SpongeBob SquarePants operates on a level of unreality that invites interpretation. When something is this weird, this consistently bizarre, people naturally look for explanations. And for some people, the explanation is drugs. It's reductive, sure, but it comes from a real place. The show is genuinely psychedelic in its visual style and storytelling at times, and that's by design. Hillenberg studied experimental animation at CalArts under Jules Engel. His sensibility was shaped by avant-garde art and surrealist filmmaking. The weirdness of SpongeBob isn't accidental. It's the product of a creator who was deeply versed in the art of the strange. Now, there's a theory that I want to spend some real time with, because I think it's one of the most underrated conspiracy theories in the SpongeBob fandom, and it has to do with a character that most people overlook, Mrs. Puff. Mrs. Puff is SpongeBob's boating school teacher. She's been on the show since season 1. She runs Mrs. Puff's boating school, where SpongeBob has failed his driving test an absurd number of times. And on the surface, she seems like a pretty straightforward character. She's patient. She's long-suffering. She's the teacher who can't get through to her worst student. But there's a dark undercurrent to Mrs. Puff that the show hints at repeatedly, without ever fully explaining. In the episode No Free Rides, which aired as Season 2, Episode 10A on February 7th, 2001, it's strongly implied that Mrs. Puff has a criminal past. She moved to Bikini Bottom from somewhere else. She changed her name. She has a history of giving out licenses to undeserving students and then fleeing the consequences. The episode suggests that Mrs. Puff has done this before, possibly multiple times. She arrives in a new town, sets up a boating school, eventually has a student so terrible that they cause a catastrophe, and then she disappears and starts over somewhere else with a new identity. And the show drops other hints throughout its run. Mrs. Puff doesn't like talking about her husband. When his fate is mentioned, it's revealed that Mr. Puff was captured by humans and turned into a novelty lamp, a lamp, made from her dead husband, and she just has to live with that. There's also the fact that Mrs. Puff has anxiety so severe that she has to call her therapist mid-class and ask for a mega dose of anxiety medication. This is a character who is, on some level, deeply traumatized. She's running from something, and the show never tells us exactly what. The conspiracy theory version of Mrs. Puff's backstory goes further. Some fans believe that Mrs. Puff isn't just a teacher with a sketchy past. They believe she's in something like witness protection. That whatever happened at her previous boating school, wherever she was before Bikini Bottom, was bad enough that she needed a completely new identity. And SpongeBob, this impossibly enthusiastic student who keeps failing and keeps coming back and keeps destroying everything in his path, is essentially her worst nightmare come back to haunt her. He's the thing she's been running from. Not SpongeBob specifically, but a student like SpongeBob. A student who, despite all her efforts, she can't help. A student who will inevitably cause the same kind of disaster that forced her to run the last time. And I keep thinking about what this means for Mrs. Puff as a character. Because if you accept this reading, even partially, she becomes one of the most tragic figures in the show. She's not just a put-upon teacher. She's a woman with PTSD who keeps getting trapped in the same cycle of failure. She can't stop teaching because it's the only thing she knows how to do. She can't get rid of SpongeBob because he keeps coming back. And every day she sits in her classroom looking at this enthusiastic little sponge who has no idea that he represents everything she's afraid of, and she tries to hold it together. That's heavy for a Nickelodeon cartoon. That's really heavy. Let me pivot to something that I've been saving because I think it's one of the most fascinating production-related theories about SpongeBob, and it has to do with the Krabby Patty secret formula. What is the secret formula? The show has built its entire mythology around this question. Plankton's entire character arc is about trying to steal it. Mr. Krabs' entire personality is built around protecting it. The Krabby Patty is the most important object in the SpongeBob universe, and we've never been told what's in it. And the fan theories about its ingredients range from mundane to genuinely disturbing. The most popular theory, and the one that makes me uncomfortable, is that the secret ingredient is crab meat. Yes. The theory is that Mr. Krabs, a crab, is serving his own kind as food. And while that sounds insane, the evidence that fans point to is actually kind of unsettling. Have you ever noticed that Mr. Krabs is the only crab in Bikini Bottom? There are no other crabs. In a world full of diverse marine life, where you see fish and octopi and whales and squirrels and even humans from time to time, there are no other crabs. Where did they all go? The Krabby Patty. That's the theory. They went into the Krabby Patty. And it gets worse. The Krabby Patty is specifically a burger. It's a round patty on a bun. What kind of sea creature makes a round, flat patty? What kind of meat would you use? If you're trying to make something that looks like a burger using marine ingredients, crab meat would actually work. You could form it into a patty. You could grill it. It would taste good. And Mr. Krabs, whose obsession with money is well documented, would have access to the cheapest possible ingredient, his own species. But here's where the theory falls apart for me, and I think this is important. SpongeBob SquarePants producer Vincent Waller directly addressed this. He said that Stephen Hillenberg let slip that there is absolutely no meat in the Krabby Patty. None. No animal product at all. The Krabby Patty, according to the show's creator, is effectively vegetarian, which means the crab meat theory, as creepy as it is, doesn't hold up against what Hillenberg himself apparently said. There's another Krabby Patty theory that I find even more interesting though. The theory that the secret formula is nothing. That there is no secret ingredient. That the secret formula is a marketing scheme. A myth that Mr. Krabs created to make people believe the Krabby Patty is special. Think about it. The obsession with the formula is what drives customers to the Krusty Krab. If people found out there was no secret, the mystique would vanish. By keeping it secret, mister. Krabs ensures that people believe they're getting something exclusive, something special, something worth coming back for. That's not a food recipe. That's a brand strategy. And honestly, that reading fits Mr. Krabs' character perfectly. Of course, the cheapest, most scheming businessman in Bikini Bottom would build his entire empire on a lie. Of course, the formula is empty. The real secret is that there is no secret. And the whole thing is just another way for Mr. Krabs to make money from nothing. But then there's the pearl theory, and this one is dark. Some fans believe that the secret ingredient in the Krabby Patty is ambergris, which is a waxy substance produced in the digestive systems of sperm whales. In the real world, ambergris has been used in perfumes and has historically been extremely valuable. And Mr. Krabs has a daughter who is a whale. Pearl Krabs is a sperm whale. The theory suggests that Mr. Krabs is somehow harvesting ambergris from Pearl, his own daughter, to use in his secret formula, which would explain both why the formula is secret and why Mr. Krabs keeps Pearl around, despite seemingly having no emotional attachment to her whatsoever. I don't love this theory. I think it attributes a level of intentional cruelty to Mr. Krabs that goes beyond what the show supports, even at his worst. But I understand why it exists. The question of why Mr. Krabs, a crab, has a whale for a daughter has been one of the biggest mysteries in SpongeBob lore since the show began. And in the absence of a satisfying canonical answer, fans are going to fill in the blanks. And speaking of Pearl, let me quickly talk about the mystery of her parentage, because this is a genuine production conspiracy, not a fan theory. Pearl Krabs is a whale. Her father is a crab. How? The official SpongeBob SquarePants trivia book says that Mr. Krabs was once married to a whale who gave birth to Pearl. So Pearl's mother is a whale. But here's what's interesting. Stephen Hillenberg was apparently asked many times to do an episode explaining Pearl's origin. Fans sent letters requesting it, and Hillenberg refused. He was, according to reports, strongly opposed to solving the mystery. He shelved an episode that would have focused on Pearl's origin story, specifically because he didn't want to answer the question. Think about that. The creator of the show deliberately chose to leave this mystery unsolved. He didn't want to explain it. He didn't want to demystify it. He wanted the question to remain a question. And I think that tells you something about Hillenberg's philosophy as a storyteller. He understood that some questions are more interesting than their answers. The mystery of Pearl's existence is more fun, more engaging, and more conversation generating than any explanation could be. The moment you answer it, you lose all of that. And Hillenberg was smart enough to know that. Speaking of mysteries, the show left deliberately unresolved. Let me talk about one of the weirdest and most persistent theories in the SpongeBob fandom. The theory that SpongeBob and Patrick's relationship is romantic. Now, this theory predates the show's actual acknowledgement of the topic, and it's one that I think is worth discussing thoughtfully. Throughout the show's run, SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship is depicted with an intensity that goes beyond typical cartoon buddy dynamics. They hold hands. They share emotional moments. In Rockabye Bivalve, which aired on March 29th, 2002, as Season 3, Episode 9A, they literally adopt a baby scallop and raise it together, with SpongeBob staying home as the mom and Patrick going to work as the dad. The episode plays their domestic arrangement completely straight. It's not a joke. It's the premise. They have arguments about who does more housework. Patrick comes home late and doesn't help with the baby. SpongeBob feels underappreciated. It's a parody of heterosexual domestic life, performed by two male sea creatures. In 2020, Nickelodeon released a tweet during Pride Month identifying SpongeBob as a member of the LGBTQ+ community, alongside Korra from The Legend of Korra and Schwoz from Henry Danger. The tweet was somewhat ambiguous. It didn't specify SpongeBob's orientation, but it was widely interpreted as confirming that SpongeBob is at minimum not straight. And Stephen Hillenberg himself had previously described SpongeBob as somewhat asexual, saying that the character was not designed with sexuality in mind at all. I think the truth is probably simpler and more interesting than either the SpongeBob is gay or SpongeBob is straight readings. I think SpongeBob is a character whose love for his friends is depicted without the boundaries that adult viewers project onto it. He loves Patrick the way a child loves their best friend. Totally, unreservedly, and without any awareness that the intensity of that love might be read as something else. And the show's willingness to depict that kind of pure, unboundaried affection between two male characters is, whether intentional or not, kind of radical. In a media landscape where male friendships are typically depicted with layers of distance and emotional restraint, SpongeBob and Patrick just love each other. No qualifiers, no heteronormative safety nets, just two friends who would do anything for each other. Okay, I want to take us into some territory that I find absolutely fascinating, and it's something that I think about every time I rewatch the early seasons: the hidden adult jokes. SpongeBob SquarePants is a kids show. It airs on Nickelodeon, a children's network. It's rated TVY7, and buried inside this children's show are jokes that are unmistakably, undeniably meant for adults. And I'm not talking about subtle thematic stuff. I'm talking about actual dirty jokes that sailed right over every kid's head and landed squarely in the laps of every parent watching. Here's the most famous one. In the episode Gary Takes a Bath, which aired on July 26th, 2002, as Season 3, Episode 11B, SpongeBob tries to convince Gary to take a bath. And at one point, he holds up a bar of soap and says, "Don't drop the soap. Don't drop the soap," in a children's cartoon. That is a prison joke. There is no other interpretation. Every adult watching that episode instantly understood the reference, and every kid watching it just thought SpongeBob was telling his snail not to be clumsy. It's a perfect dual audience joke. The kids get the surface level. The adults get the subtext. And neither audience's experience is diminished by the others. Then there's the one that I still can't believe aired on Nickelodeon. In an early episode, SpongeBob comes home and catches Gary watching something on television. The screen isn't shown, but SpongeBob's reaction makes it clear that whatever Gary is watching is inappropriate. The visual gag is set up exactly like someone walking in on another person watching adult content. SpongeBob is embarrassed. Gary tries to change the channel. The joke is unmistakable to any adult and completely invisible to any child. And then there's Sailor Mouth, Season 2, Episode 18A, which aired on September 21st, 2001. In this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick discover a bad word written on a dumpster behind the Krusty Krab. They start using it, not knowing it's a swear word, and the show censors the word with dolphin noises. Every time SpongeBob or Patrick swears, a dolphin chirp covers it up. It's brilliant because it teaches kids that swear words exist and are inappropriate without actually exposing them to any real profanity. But for adults, the joke is that we know exactly what they're saying. We can fill in the blanks. And the escalation of the episode, where eventually even Mr. Krabs starts cursing up a storm and the dolphin noises become practically continuous, is genuinely hilarious on an adult level. There's also the French tickler joke. In one episode, Patrick pulls out what he calls a French tickler, which is a specific type of ribbed condom. He pulls it out, and it's actually a tiny toy. But the name. How did that get past standards and practices? How did someone at Nickelodeon hear French tickler in a script for a children's show and say, yeah, that's fine? The answer is that the writers were incredibly skilled at walking the line between kid-appropriate and adult funny. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were writing for two audiences simultaneously, and they were doing it better than almost any other show on television. And I think this is where the SpongeBob isn't a kid's show conspiracy theory comes from. Because when you compile all of these jokes, all of these references, all of these moments where the show is clearly, deliberately speaking to an adult audience, you start to wonder who the primary audience actually is. Was SpongeBob always meant for adults as much as for children? Was it designed from the beginning to function on multiple levels? And I think the answer is yes, but not in the way the conspiracy theory suggests. SpongeBob isn't secretly an adult show disguised as a children's show. It's a show that respects its audience enough to not talk down to anyone. It's a show where the writers believed that children deserve humor that's clever and layered, not just simple and loud. And the adult jokes aren't there to undermine the children's experience. They're there because Stephen Hillenberg and his writing team believed that great comedy works for everyone. And the way to make it work for everyone is to build in layers that different audiences can appreciate at different levels. This is something that a lot of modern children's entertainment doesn't understand. They think family-friendly means dumbed down. SpongeBob proved that the opposite is true. The smartest, most layered, most complex comedy you can write is also the most universally appealing. And that's why the show has endured for over 25 years, while most of its contemporaries have been forgotten. Let me talk about something that's been on my mind constantly while putting this video together. It's related to the hidden adult jokes, but it goes deeper. It's the theory that SpongeBob SquarePants is, at its core, a show about capitalism. Think about it. What is SpongeBob's life? He works at a fast food restaurant for minimum wage, or maybe less. His boss, Mr. Krabs, is a ruthless capitalist who values money above everything, including the health and safety of his employees. SpongeBob's job is repetitive, physically demanding, and offers no advancement. He's been a fry cook for the entire run of the show. He's never gotten a meaningful raise. He's never been promoted, except briefly in the movie, which, as we discussed, was supposed to be the series finale. And SpongeBob loves it. He absolutely loves it. He wakes up every morning thrilled to go to work. He finds genuine joy and meaning in flipping burgers. He considers his job not just employment, but a calling. And the show never treats this as sad. It's presented as SpongeBob's defining positive trait, his enthusiasm for his work, his ability to find purpose in something that most people would find soul-crushing. But here's the thing. If you step back and look at it through an adult lens, SpongeBob's enthusiasm for his exploitative job is kind of devastating. He's the perfect employee. He never complains. He never asks for more money. He never questions the system that keeps him at the bottom while his boss hoards wealth. He's so invested in his work that he can't even take a day off without having a breakdown. And the show, whether intentionally or not, presents this as admirable. Is SpongeBob a critique of capitalism? Or is it a celebration of finding joy within capitalism's constraints? I've been going back and forth on this, and I think it's both. I think the show simultaneously critiques Mr. Krabs' greed and celebrates SpongeBob's ability to be happy despite that greed. And the tension between those two readings is what gives the show its philosophical depth. Because here's the other side of it. Squidward. Squidward hates his job. He hates the Krusty Krab. He considers himself above fast food work. He believes he's destined for better things, for a career as a musician or an artist, and the show consistently punishes him for those aspirations. Squidward is miserable, specifically because he can't find meaning in his work the way SpongeBob can. His refusal to accept his station in life is presented as the source of his suffering. So you've got two characters. One finds joy in exploitative labor and is happy. The other rejects exploitative labor and is miserable. And the show asks you, without ever explicitly stating the question, which approach is right? Is SpongeBob wise for accepting his circumstances? Or is he being exploited? Is Squidward foolish for being unhappy? Or is he the only one who sees the truth? And the beautiful thing is that the show never answers. It lets both readings coexist. It lets you decide. I've watched SpongeBob probably 6 times more than is healthy while putting this together, and every time I rewatch the early seasons with this economic lens, I notice something new. The way Mr. Krabs calculates the exact cost of a single drop of ketchup. The way he charges his employees for breathing the air in his restaurant. The way he literally sold SpongeBob to the Flying Dutchman for 62 cents in Born Again Crabs. These aren't just jokes about greed. They're observations about the relationship between capital and labor, filtered through absurdist cartoon comedy. And I think the fact that kids don't see this layer is part of the point, because kids grow up in this system. They don't have the perspective to see how strange it is. And SpongeBob, in its own weird way, preserves that strangeness for them to discover later. Alright, I need to talk about Gary, because there's a theory about Gary the snail that I think is criminally underappreciated, and it connects to several of the other theories we've discussed tonight. Gary is SpongeBob's pet. He meows like a cat. He eats. He sleeps. He's treated as a relatively simple animal. But here's the thing. Gary isn't simple. Gary might be the smartest character in the entire show. In Sleepy Time, which aired on January 17th, 2000, as Season 1, Episode 15A, SpongeBob visits Gary's dream. And in that dream, Gary owns a library. He speaks in complete, eloquent sentences. He's reading philosophy. He's intellectual. He's refined. The joke is that Gary, the pet who can only say meow in the waking world, is actually a genius trapped in an animal's body. And the show reinforces this in subtle ways throughout its run. Gary understands everything SpongeBob says. He reacts appropriately to complex situations. He demonstrates problem-solving abilities that go far beyond what a simple pet should be capable of. There's even the episode, Have You Seen This Snail?, where Gary independently navigates Bikini Bottom, evaluates potential new owners, and makes conscious decisions about his living situation. He's not being guided by instinct. He's making choices. So the theory goes like this. Snails in the SpongeBob universe are functionally equivalent to cats. They meow. They're kept as pets. They're treated as animals. But Gary, specifically, is demonstrably intelligent. He has a rich inner life. He understands language. He has opinions and preferences and the capacity for independent thought. And yet he's treated as a pet. He can't communicate his intelligence because the only sound he can make is meow. He's trapped. And there's a fan theory that attempts to explain this. The theory suggests that in the SpongeBob universe, when pets are born, they have normal voices. But when they're neutered, or in this case purchased from a pet store where they've been fixed, they lose the ability to speak and are reduced to animal sounds. Gary, who was likely store-bought, was neutered, and that's why he can only meow despite being clearly intelligent. I don't know if I buy that specific theory, but I find the underlying observation fascinating. Gary is a character who exists in a state of perpetual misunderstanding. He knows more than anyone gives him credit for. He sees everything. He understands everything, but he can't express it. And there's something genuinely poignant about that, especially in a show that's supposedly about happiness and optimism. Right there in SpongeBob's house, living with him every day, is a character who is fundamentally unable to be understood by the people around him. Remember what I said earlier about the autism theory? About SpongeBob struggling with communication and social cues? There's an interesting parallel with Gary. Both characters experience a disconnect between their internal world and their ability to communicate with others. SpongeBob communicates too much, but doesn't understand the effect. Gary understands perfectly, but can't communicate at all. They're opposite sides of the same coin. Now let's get into something that I know a lot of you have been waiting for: the production conspiracies. Because SpongeBob SquarePants has been on the air for so long, and has gone through so many creative changes, that the behind-the-scenes story is almost as dramatic as anything that happens in the show. We already talked about Hillenberg stepping back after the first movie, and the quality decline that followed. But there's more to this story, a lot more, because the changes to SpongeBob after the movie weren't just about one person leaving. They were about a fundamental shift in how Nickelodeon treated the show. After Season 3, Nickelodeon increased the number of episodes per season from 20 to 26. That means the production team went from making 40 11-minute segments per season to 52. That's a 30% increase in workload. And the writing team changed significantly. Many of the original writers and artists who had worked with Hillenberg left the show. The people who replaced them were talented, but they didn't have the same chemistry, the same institutional knowledge, the same understanding of what made the show work. And here's where the production conspiracy comes in. Some fans believe that Nickelodeon deliberately ran SpongeBob into the ground. Not by accident, not through negligence, but as a deliberate business strategy. The theory goes like this. Nickelodeon knew that SpongeBob was a cash cow regardless of quality. The merchandise sales, the theme park attractions, the licensing deals, none of that was dependent on whether individual episodes were good. It was dependent on SpongeBob remaining culturally relevant. And the best way to remain culturally relevant is to keep producing content, regardless of its quality, so that the brand stays visible. According to this theory, Nickelodeon didn't care about the show's creative quality, because the show was never primarily about creative quality. It was about brand maintenance. Every episode, good or bad, kept SpongeBob in the public consciousness. Every episode generated promotional opportunities, merchandise tie-ins, and social media buzz. The show's quality could decline indefinitely, and as long as kids still recognized SpongeBob, the money would keep flowing. And honestly, I think there's truth to this. Maybe not as a deliberate conspiracy, but as an institutional reality. Corporations don't think about art. They think about revenue. And SpongeBob's revenue was never dependent on the show being good. It was dependent on the show existing. And so the show kept existing, long past the point where its creator wanted it to stop. Long past the point where its quality consistently justified its continuation. But then something happened that complicated this narrative. Hillenberg came back. Around season 9B, Stephen Hillenberg returned to SpongeBob SquarePants in an executive producer role. And almost immediately, the quality improved. Fans noticed it. Critics noticed it. The episodes felt tighter, funnier, more like the show they remembered from the early 2000s. The characters regained some of their original nuance. The mean-spiritedness that had characterized the middle seasons softened. It wasn't quite the golden age again, but it was noticeably better. And I think this is the strongest evidence against the Nickelodeon deliberately ran the show into the ground theory. Because if it were true, why would they let Hillenberg come back? Why would they allow him to improve the show's quality? If the strategy was purely about brand maintenance, regardless of quality, a returning creator who might slow production or change the creative direction would be a liability, not an asset. I think the truth is messier than any conspiracy theory. I think Nickelodeon genuinely wanted SpongeBob to be good, but they also wanted it to be profitable. And when those two goals conflicted, profit won. When Hillenberg was there to fight for quality, the show was excellent. When he wasn't, the show defaulted to the path of least resistance, which meant more episodes, faster turnaround, and less attention to craft. And then Hillenberg got sick, and then he died. And the question of what SpongeBob SquarePants should be, without him, became the defining question of the show's future. Which brings me to the spin-offs. And this is genuinely controversial territory. I know a lot of people have strong feelings about this, and I want to be fair to all sides. In June 2019, about 7 months after Hillenberg's death, Nickelodeon announced Camp Corral, SpongeBob's Under Years, a CGI animated prequel spin-off showing the SpongeBob characters as children at a summer camp. And the backlash was fierce, because everyone knew, or thought they knew, how Hillenberg felt about spin-offs. In a 2009 interview, Hillenberg had said that the show was about SpongeBob, that he was the core element, and that he didn't see any spin-offs happening. He specifically mentioned Patrick, saying that Patrick by himself might be too much. This was widely interpreted as Hillenberg being against spin-offs altogether. And Paul Tibbitt, who served as showrunner after Hillenberg stepped back, tweeted after the Camp Corral announcement that Hillenberg would have hated it. That's a direct quote from someone who worked closely with Hillenberg for years. He would have hated it. But then there's the other side. Vincent Waller, who was a showrunner and co-executive producer on SpongeBob, claimed that Hillenberg knew about Camp Corral before he passed and approved of what the staff was going for during the early concept stages. If that's true, and it's difficult to verify, then the narrative changes significantly. It means Hillenberg didn't die in opposition to spin-offs. It means he had at least some awareness of what was coming, and gave at least tentative approval. I don't know who's right. I genuinely don't. Tibbitt knew Hillenberg. Waller knew Hillenberg. They both worked with him. They both claim to know what he wanted, and they disagree. And Hillenberg isn't here to settle it. What I do know is that the spin-offs happened. Camp Coral premiered on Paramount Plus on March 4th, 2021. The Patrick Star Show premiered later that same year, and the reception was exactly what you'd expect. Mixed. Some fans were willing to give them a chance. Others viewed them as a betrayal of Hillenberg's legacy, and the controversy reveals a fundamental tension in how we think about creative ownership. Does a creator's vision extend beyond their lifetime? Can a show continue and even expand without the person who created it? And if it can, should it? I don't have clean answers to those questions, but I think they're worth sitting with, especially tonight, as we think about what SpongeBob means and what it represents. Let me shift gears entirely and talk about one of the most fun conspiracy theories in the SpongeBob fandom, because we've been in some heavy territory, and I think we could all use something lighter. Let's talk about the theory that SpongeBob's pineapple house is alive. SpongeBob lives in a pineapple under the sea. We know this. It's in the theme song. But have you ever noticed that the pineapple seems to have biological properties? It grows. It changes. In some episodes, it sprouts leaves. In others, it decays. It reacts to its environment in ways that a normal house wouldn't. And some fans believe that the pineapple isn't just a house shaped like a pineapple. They believe it's an actual pineapple that's still alive, still growing, still functioning as a biological organism. The origin of the pineapple house is actually explained in the show. In Truth or Square, a TV movie that aired on November 6th, 2009, we see a flashback showing a pineapple falling off a ship navigating the waters above Bikini Bottom. It lands on Squidward's garden, destroying it, and SpongeBob discovers it and moves in. But the theory suggests that because it's a real pineapple, not a constructed house, it has properties that a normal building wouldn't have. It can regenerate, it can grow, it can be damaged, and repair itself. In some episodes, it's destroyed entirely and grows back from a tiny seed. Stephen Hillenberg actually explained his reasoning for the pineapple house. He said he imagined presenting SpongeBob with a rock, a pineapple, an Easter Island head, and an old rubber boot. And SpongeBob would pick the pineapple because he's an optimist who would like the smell. The rock became Patrick's home. The Easter Island head became Squidward's, and the pineapple became SpongeBob's. Each home reflects the personality of its occupant. Patrick lives under a rock because he's simple. Squidward lives in an artistic stone head because he values culture. And SpongeBob lives in a pineapple because he's colorful, sweet, and tropical. It's not deep, it's just good character design. But I love that fans have taken this simple design choice and spun it into a theory about a living house. Because that's what SpongeBob does to people. It invites overthinking. It rewards close viewing. And even the simplest elements of its world can generate hours of speculation and debate. Alright, let me tell you about something that I find genuinely strange, and I've never been able to fully explain it. The underwater fire theory. In SpongeBob SquarePants, there are campfires, there are fireplaces, there are candles, there are matches, there is fire, underwater, and the show is aware of this. There's a famous moment, I think it's in Pressure, from season 2, where a campfire is burning underwater, and Patrick picks it up. The fire goes out. He puts it down. The fire comes back. He picks it up. Fire goes out. He looks at the camera with this confused expression. The fire shouldn't exist. The show knows the fire shouldn't exist, and it uses that impossibility as a joke. But some fans have taken this further. They've theorized that the existence of fire underwater is evidence that Bikini Bottom isn't actually underwater at all. The theory suggests that the characters of SpongeBob live in a pressurized environment, possibly artificial, that simulates underwater conditions, but actually allows for combustion. Or, connecting back to the nuclear theory, that the radiation from the Bikini Atoll tests altered the laws of physics in the immediate area, creating conditions where fire can burn underwater. I think this is one of those theories where the real answer is both boring and perfect. The real answer is that SpongeBob is a cartoon, and cartoons don't obey the laws of physics. Stephen Hillenberg was a marine biologist. He knew fire doesn't burn underwater. The joke is that it does. That's the entire joke. It's the show breaking its own rules for comedy, and then winking at the audience to let them know it's aware of what it's doing. But here's why I think the theory is still interesting, even though the answer is obvious. It shows how much the audience wants the SpongeBob universe to be internally consistent. We want the rules to make sense. We want there to be an explanation for everything. And that desire for consistency, that need for the world to hold together, is a testament to how immersive the show's world building is. SpongeBob created a world compelling enough that people demand logic from it. even when the show's entire comedic philosophy is built on defying logic. Now, I want to talk about something that connects to the production history we discussed earlier, but from a different angle. I want to talk about Tom Kenny and the theory that SpongeBob's voice has changed over the years. This isn't really a conspiracy theory. It's more of an observation that has taken on conspiracy theory-like proportions in the fandom. If you listen to SpongeBob's voice in Season 1, and then listen to his voice in Season 14, they sound different. The pitch is higher in later seasons. The energy is more manic. The cadence is faster. And fans have been debating for years whether this is intentional or accidental. Tom Kenny has described SpongeBob's voice as being somewhere between a child and an adult, comparing it to a Stan Laurel or Jerry Lewis kind of character. And in the early seasons, the voice lands more on the adult side of that spectrum. SpongeBob sounds like an enthusiastic young man. By the later seasons, he sounds more like an excited child. The voice has crept higher and more exaggerated over time. Some fans believe this is evidence of the Flanderization theory. As SpongeBob became more childish as a character, his voice became more childish to match. Others believe it's simply the natural result of performing a character voice for over 25 years. Voices change. Actors' interpretations evolve. What sounds like a deliberate change might just be the natural drift that happens when someone plays the same character for a quarter of a century. And there's a third theory, which I find the most interesting. Some fans believe the voice change is a reflection of the show's shifting target audience. In the early seasons, SpongeBob was positioned as a show for older kids and young adults, and the voice reflected that. As the show increasingly targeted younger demographics, especially after the first movie, the voice shifted to be more appealing to smaller children. This theory suggests that the voice change wasn't creative at all. It was market-driven. It was Nickelodeon adjusting its most valuable asset to maximize appeal to its core demographic. I don't think we'll ever know the real answer. Tom Kenny has been diplomatic about it in interviews, and I respect that. He's given decades of his life to this character, and he doesn't owe anyone an explanation for the natural evolution of his performance. But the fact that fans analyze his vocal performance with this level of intensity says something about how much people care about the show. When the pitch of a cartoon sponge's voice generates years of debate, that's not just fandom. That's devotion. Let me take us to something I find really fun. The theory about Bikini Bottom's geography. If you've ever looked closely at the establishing shots of Bikini Bottom, you might have noticed that the geography doesn't make sense. The distances between locations seem to change from episode to episode. Sometimes the Krusty Krab is right next to SpongeBob's house. Sometimes it's far away. Sometimes Rock Bottom, this terrifying deep-sea city that SpongeBob visits in the Season 1 episode, Rock Bottom, which aired on March 15th, 2000, seems to be accessible by a simple bus ride. Other times, it's depicted as this impossibly distant, nearly unreachable place. And some fans have theorized that this geographic inconsistency is intentional. That Bikini Bottom isn't a fixed city. It shifts. It changes. The distances between locations expand and contract based on the needs of the story. And while the obvious explanation is that it's just cartoon logic, there's a more creative interpretation. Some fans believe that Bikini Bottom is a post-apocalyptic landscape where radiation has warped the physical laws of the area. The same nuclear energy that gave the sea creatures sentience also bent space in the region, making distances fluid and geography malleable. Do I think the writers intended this? No, but I love the creativity of the theory. I love that fans are so invested in this world that they're trying to build unified theories of physics for a cartoon city at the bottom of the ocean. That's the kind of engagement most shows can only dream of. Okay, here's something I need to talk about. And it's the theory that I think is the most unsettling one in the entire SpongeBob conspiracy theory canon. The theory that SpongeBob and all of Bikini Bottom are dead. The purgatory theory. Now, this is a type of theory that gets applied to a lot of shows. Lost was famously subjected to purgatory theories throughout its run. People have theorized that the Rugrats babies are dead. It's a common pattern in fan theory culture. Take a colorful, seemingly happy show and argue that the characters are actually deceased, and the world they inhabit is some form of afterlife. The SpongeBob version goes like this. The characters of Bikini Bottom are the souls of people who died at sea. Each character represents a different type of person who drowned or was killed in the ocean. SpongeBob is a child who drowned. Patrick is someone who was lost at sea and slowly lost his mind before dying. Squidward is someone who killed himself by drowning, which is why he's perpetually miserable. He chose to die, and now he's stuck. Mr. Krabs is a sailor who went down with his ship, clutching his treasure. Sandy is someone who drowned in a diving accident, which is why she wears a diving suit. She's perpetually reliving the circumstances of her death. I want to be clear. I don't like this theory. I think it's lazy, and I think it does a disservice to the actual craftsmanship of the show. It's the equivalent of saying, it was all a dream. It explains everything by explaining nothing. You can apply the purgatory reading to literally any show, and it always works because it's unfalsifiable. How do you prove that a fictional world isn't purgatory? You can't. And because you can't, the theory technically can't be disproven, which gives it the appearance of depth without actually having any. But I'm including it because it's one of the most well-known SpongeBob conspiracy theories, and because I think it reveals something interesting about how people engage with media. The purgatory theory is, at its core, an attempt to find meaning in suffering. If the characters are dead, then their struggles have cosmic significance. Squidward's misery isn't just bad luck, it's divine punishment. SpongeBob's happiness isn't just a personality trait, it's the bliss of ignorance in the afterlife. By reframing the show as purgatory, the theory gives every moment theological weight, and I understand the appeal of that, even though I don't agree with it. When you watch a show as much as SpongeBob fans have watched SpongeBob, you start looking for systems. You start looking for underlying structures that explain everything. And the purgatory theory provides that structure, even if it does so in a way that I think undermines what makes the show actually great. Because here's the thing, SpongeBob doesn't need cosmic significance to be meaningful. It doesn't need to be about death or the afterlife or divine judgment. It's a show about a sponge who loves his job, loves his friends, and approaches every day with genuine enthusiasm. And the reason that resonates with people isn't because it's secretly about purgatory. It's because optimism in the face of mundane reality is, by itself, a profound statement about how to live. Let me move on to something more grounded. Something that actually happened during the show's production, and that I think qualifies as a genuine production conspiracy. The censored and deleted content. SpongeBob SquarePants has been censored more times than most people realize. Episodes have been edited after their initial airings. Scenes have been removed. Jokes have been cut. And in most cases, the only record of the original versions exists in the memories of people who saw the first broadcast, or in rare recordings that fans have preserved. One of the most famous examples is from Chocolate with Nuts, Season 3, Episode 12A, which aired on June 1st, 2002. In the original airing, there's a scene where Patrick says a line that was later cut because it sounded like a sexual reference. The line involved Patrick talking about his nuts in a context that, when combined with the word chocolate, created an innuendo that Nickelodeon apparently decided was too much even for SpongeBob. Another example is from Just One Bite, Season 3, Episode 3B. In the original airing, there's a scene where Squidward breaks into the Krusty Krab's patty vault and triggers a security system that engulfs him in two separate explosions. After a few airings, the scene was cut, likely because it showed a character being graphically injured in a way that didn't fit the show's tone. But fans remember it, and the edited version of the episode feels noticeably shorter and oddly paced, like something is missing, because something is. Then there's Party Pooper Pants, which originally included a scene of SpongeBob behaving in a way that appeared to reference drunkenness. It was cut after the initial broadcast because of concerns about depicting alcohol-influenced behavior in a children's show. And Can You Spare a Dime originally had a scene where SpongeBob chokes Mr. Krabs that went on significantly longer than the version most people have seen. In the original cut, Mr. Krabs' eyes turned bloodshot red from the choking. It was shortened for being too violent. What fascinates me about these cuts is that they happened after the episodes aired. The original content was created, approved, animated, voiced, and broadcast on national television. Kids saw it. Parents saw it. And then, afterward, Someone at Nickelodeon decided it was too much and had it removed from subsequent airings and home video releases, which means there are two versions of these episodes. The version that aired once, and the sanitized version that exists in the official record. And I think this is a genuine conspiracy, in the sense that Nickelodeon has never been fully transparent about what was cut and why. There's no official list of edits. There's no statement acknowledging that episodes were altered after broadcast. The changes were made quietly, and if it weren't for fans with good memories and recording equipment, we might never know the original versions existed at all. This brings up an interesting philosophical question about media preservation. When a show is edited after broadcast, which version is the real one? The version that the creators originally made and aired? Or the version that the network subsequently approved for distribution? For SpongeBob, the answer depends on who you ask. Some fans consider the original broadcasts to be the definitive versions. Others accept the edited versions as improvements. And the tension between those perspectives mirrors the broader tension between creative vision and corporate control that runs through the entire history of SpongeBob SquarePants. Okay, I want to dive into a theory that connects multiple things we've already talked about, and I think it's one of the most compelling readings of SpongeBob SquarePants that exists. The theory that the show is a deliberate commentary on suburban American life. Look at Bikini Bottom. What is it? It's a suburb. It has a main street with a few businesses. It has residential neighborhoods where everyone knows each other. It has a fast food restaurant that serves as the town's main gathering place. It has a school. It has a local government. It has everything a small American town has, just underwater. And the characters map onto suburban archetypes perfectly. SpongeBob is the overeager neighbor who mows his lawn at 6 in the morning and brings cookies to everyone who moves in. Squidward is the miserable office worker who hates his job, hates his neighbors, and spends his free time pursuing hobbies that no one appreciates. Patrick is the guy who's always at home, never seems to work, and you're not entirely sure what he does for a living. Mr. Krabs is the local business owner who underpays everyone and cuts corners constantly. Sandy is the outsider who moved in from somewhere else and is treated with curiosity and occasional suspicion. And the problems they face are suburban problems. Noisy neighbors, bad bosses, boring jobs, the desperate desire to be something more than what your circumstances allow. Squidward wants to be an artist, but he's stuck as a cashier. SpongeBob wants a promotion, but Mr. Krabs will never give him one. Sandy misses home. Plankton can't compete with the established business down the street. These aren't underwater problems. They're human problems. Universal, mundane, deeply relatable human problems dressed up in cartoon costumes. And I think this is actually the real hidden meaning of SpongeBob SquarePants. Not the nuclear theory, not the 7 deadly sins, not the purgatory theory. The hidden meaning is that it's about us. It's about ordinary people living ordinary lives in an ordinary town, finding joy and sadness and frustration and meaning in the same places we all do. The ocean setting isn't a disguise. It's a lens. By placing these human dynamics underwater, the show defamiliarizes them enough that we can see them clearly. You know what I keep thinking about? There's this specific kind of loneliness that SpongeBob depicts that I don't think any other show has ever captured as well. It's not dramatic loneliness. It's not the loneliness of isolation or abandonment. It's suburban loneliness. The loneliness of being surrounded by people and still feeling alone. Squidward feels it constantly. He's never by himself. SpongeBob and Patrick are always there, but he's perpetually lonely because no one around him understands or appreciates what matters to him. That's suburban loneliness. That's the loneliness of the commuter, the cubicle worker, the person who goes to the neighborhood barbecue and smiles and nods and goes home feeling emptier than when they left. And the fact that a Nickelodeon cartoon captured that feeling better than most prestige dramas have is, to me, one of the most remarkable things about SpongeBob SquarePants. It didn't need to be heavy to be deep. It didn't need to be dark to be meaningful. It found profundity in the mundane. And that might be Stephen Hillenberg's greatest achievement as a storyteller. All right, let's go back to the conspiracy theories. I want to talk about something that doesn't get enough attention. The theory about the Krusty Krab being built out of a lobster trap. If you look at the Krusty Krab, the restaurant where SpongeBob works. It's shaped like a lobster trap. Specifically, it resembles a real-world New England-style lobster trap, the kind used to catch crustaceans. And Mr. Krabs, the owner, is a crustacean. He's a crab. He works inside a device designed to catch and trap creatures like him. The theory suggests that Mr. Krabs didn't choose the Krusty Krab's location randomly. He chose a lobster trap specifically because he understands what it is. He's a crab who lives among humans' discarded tools of marine hunting. The lobster trap, to Mr. Krabs, isn't just a building. It's a trophy. It's a symbol of his survival. The humans tried to trap creatures like him, and instead of being caught, he turned their trap into his business. It's a statement about reclaiming something that was designed to destroy you and turning it into a source of power. And I think there's actually something to this, not as a deliberate conspiracy, but as evidence of Hillenberg's design sensibility. Hillenberg was a marine biologist. He knew what lobster traps looked like. He knew what they were for. He chose that shape deliberately. And even if the metaphorical reading is deeper than he intended, the choice itself is grounded in real knowledge about the ocean and the ways humans interact with marine life. This is what I love about SpongeBob conspiracy theories. Even the ones that I don't fully buy reveal something interesting about the show's design. Because Hillenberg was such a thoughtful creator, because he drew on his scientific background and his artistic training to build every aspect of the show's world, there's always something there to find. The theories might be wrong about the intent, but they're rarely wrong about the details. The details are there. They were always there. And someone as meticulous as Hillenberg put them there for a reason, even if that reason was simpler than the theories suggest. Let me talk about another theory that I've been sitting with for a while. The theory that Plankton and Mr. Krabs were once the same person, or at least that they represent two sides of the same personality. This isn't the most popular theory, but I think it's one of the most interesting. Consider their backstory. In Friend or Foe, which aired on April 13th, 2007, as Season 5, Episode 1, we learn that Plankton and Mr. Krabs were childhood friends. They grew up together. They both loved the idea of running a restaurant, and they created the Krabby Patty together. The formula was a collaborative effort, but something went wrong. They had a falling out, and Plankton was left with nothing, while Mr. Krabs built an empire on their shared creation. And the theory suggests that this origin story is allegorical. Plankton and Mr. Krabs represent the two paths that ambition can take. Mr. Krabs represents ambition that succeeds. He took the formula, he built the restaurant, he made money, but his success made him greedy, selfish, and morally compromised. Plankton represents ambition that fails. He was left with nothing, and his failure made him bitter, envious, and obsessed with reclaiming what he lost. Neither of them is happy. The successful one is consumed by greed. The unsuccessful one is consumed by envy. They're both trapped by the same ambition that started in the same place. And Karen, Plankton's computer wife, adds another layer to this. Plankton created Karen because he had no friends. After his falling out with Mr. Krabs, he was completely alone. So he built a companion. He made a friend out of technology because he couldn't maintain one in real life. And the show depicts this relationship with surprising tenderness in places. Karen genuinely cares about Plankton. She supports him. She tolerates his obsessions. But she also sees him clearly. She knows his plans won't work. She knows he's chasing something he'll never catch. And she stays anyway. There's something deeply human about a character whose closest relationship is with a machine he built himself. In a world where real connections are possible, Plankton chose an artificial one because it's safer. A computer can't betray you the way a friend can. A computer can't reject you. A computer can't take the recipe and leave you with nothing. Karen is Plankton's protection against the kind of hurt that Mr. Krabs inflicted on him. And the tragedy is that by protecting himself from hurt, he's also protecting himself from genuine connection. And you know what? This connects back to the capitalism theory. Mr. Krabs and Plankton represent two sides of the capitalist coin, the winner and the loser, the monopolist and the struggling competitor. And neither of them is presented as happy or fulfilled. Mr. Krabs has money, but no meaningful relationships. Plankton has Karen, but no success. The show suggests, quietly, without ever stating it directly, that the game they're playing doesn't have winners. just different kinds of losers. I need you to think about something for a second. We've been talking for a while now about all these theories, all these hidden meanings, all these dark interpretations of SpongeBob SquarePants. And I want to take a step back and acknowledge something that I think gets lost in all the analysis. SpongeBob is funny. Like, genuinely, laugh out loud, tears in your eyes funny. And sometimes I think the conspiracy theory community forgets that. Because here's the thing about comedy. Good comedy doesn't need a hidden dark meaning to be worthwhile. Band Geeks doesn't need to be about Squidward's depression to be a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece because it's hilarious. The marching band falling apart, SpongeBob screaming, "Is mayonnaise an instrument?" The final sweet victory performance, those moments are funny and moving on their own terms. You don't need a conspiracy theory to appreciate them. Chocolate with Nuts is one of the funniest 11 minutes of television ever produced. SpongeBob and Patrick trying to sell chocolate door to door. The fish who screams, "Chocolate!" and chases them. The gradual escalation of their sales tactics from honest to absurdly dishonest. It's perfect comedic writing. It doesn't need to be about capitalism or the American dream or any deeper meaning. It's just funny. And being funny is enough. I think there's a danger in conspiracy theory culture of reducing art to its hidden meanings, of treating subtext as the only text that matters. And I want to resist that impulse, even in a video that's explicitly about conspiracy theories. Because SpongeBob's greatest achievement isn't its depth. It's its ability to make millions of people laugh. Everything else, all the theories, all the hidden meanings, all the analysis, is secondary to that. The show works because it's funny first and deep second. And if you reverse that priority, you miss what makes it special. Okay, tangent over. Let me get back to the theories, because there's one more big one that I've been saving. And I think it's going to surprise a lot of you. The theory about the SpongeBob SquarePants timeline. This is a fan theory that attempts to create a coherent chronological timeline of the show's events. And it gets really complicated really fast. The basic version goes like this. The show doesn't air in chronological order. Events in later episodes sometimes reference things that haven't happened yet in the show's internal timeline. Characters age and regress. Continuity is inconsistent at best and non-existent at worst. Most people attribute this to the show simply not caring about continuity. It's a cartoon. Continuity isn't important. Each episode is a standalone story. And that's probably the correct explanation. But the timeline theory attempts to impose order on the chaos. It arranges every episode in what the theorists believe is the correct chronological order based on internal evidence, character ages, references to past events, the state of various relationships, and other details. And the fascinating thing about this exercise is what it reveals about the show's internal logic. When you try to arrange SpongeBob episodes chronologically, you discover that the show's world is fundamentally inconsistent. Not in a "the writers made mistakes" way, but in a "this world operates on different rules than ours" way. Time doesn't move linearly in Bikini Bottom. Seasons change randomly. Characters don't age. Events from earlier episodes are sometimes contradicted by later ones. And these contradictions aren't bugs. They're features. They're the show telling you, explicitly, that this world doesn't operate by the rules of our world. Trying to impose a linear timeline on SpongeBob is like trying to measure a dream with a ruler. The tool doesn't fit the subject, but I love that people try. I love that the SpongeBob fandom is devoted enough to spend years attempting to organize a cartoon's chaotic mythology into something coherent. It shows the same kind of obsessive dedication that SpongeBob brings to his job at the Krusty Krab. And there's a beautiful irony in that. The fans of SpongeBob are acting like SpongeBob. They're approaching an impossible task with relentless enthusiasm and refusing to accept that it can't be done. Speaking of the timeline, there's a specific conspiracy theory about the show's timeline that I find particularly interesting. It's the theory that certain episodes were produced out of order and that Nickelodeon aired them in a different sequence than the writers intended. There's actually some evidence for this. SpongeBob episodes have production codes that are different from their airing order. Episodes produced earlier sometimes aired later, and vice versa. And fans who pay attention to these production codes have noticed that some episodes make more sense when viewed in production order rather than air date order. Character relationships develop more smoothly. References to past events land more naturally. The show's internal timeline is slightly more coherent. Whether this was a deliberate choice by Nickelodeon, scheduling decisions driven by marketing and programming needs, or simply the practical reality of how animated television production works, I don't know. But the fact that there are two different episode orderings, production order and air order, and that they tell slightly different versions of the show's story, is genuinely interesting from a media studies perspective. Let me tell you about a theory that I think deserves more attention than it gets. The theory about Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy are Spongebob and Patrick's favorite superheroes. They're elderly, retired, and living in a retirement home. They're parodies of Aquaman and Aqualad, obviously, but the theory goes deeper than just parody. The theory suggests that Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy represent what Spongebob and Patrick will eventually become. Mermaid Man, like Spongebob, is an eternal optimist who refuses to accept that his best days are behind him. He's enthusiastic, naive, and somewhat disconnected from reality. Barnacle Boy, like Patrick, is the sidekick who's content to follow along, but occasionally gets frustrated by his partner's refusal to grow up. They're Spongebob and Patrick, aged 60 years, still doing the same things, still having the same dynamic, just older and slower and sadder. And what I find poignant about this reading is what it suggests about the show's perspective on aging. Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy are past their prime. Everyone knows it. They can barely function. Their adventures are embarrassing. Their powers are fading. And yet they refuse to stop. They refuse to accept retirement. They refuse to admit that the world has moved on without them. And the show treats this with a combination of comedy and genuine tenderness. It's funny that Mermaid Man can't remember anything, but it's also sad, really sad, because behind the jokes, there's a real observation about growing old, about relevance, about the difference between who you are and who you used to be. And SpongeBob's adoration of these fading heroes is significant. SpongeBob doesn't see them as washed up. He doesn't see them as embarrassing. He sees them as heroes, full stop. He's unable to reconcile the reality of their decline with the mythology of their legend. And there's something deeply SpongeBob about that. His optimism prevents him from seeing deterioration. His enthusiasm prevents him from accepting endings. He sees the best version of everything, even when the best version is long gone. Remember what I said earlier about SpongeBob and the capitalism theory? About how his optimism might be a form of blindness? The same thing applies here. SpongeBob's refusal to see Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy's decline is the same kind of refusal that keeps him happy at the Krusty Krab. He simply doesn't register negative reality, and whether that makes him wise or foolish is something the show deliberately refuses to resolve. I want to talk about something that I think is one of the creepiest details in the entire show, and it connects to several of the theories we've discussed. The hash-slinging slasher, Graveyard Shift, Season 2, Episode 16A, which aired on September 6th, 2002. Squidward tells SpongeBob a scary story about the hash-slinging slasher, a former Krusty Krab employee who was killed and returns as a ghost. It's a classic scary campfire story setup. SpongeBob gets terrified. Everything Squidward predicted starts happening. The lights flicker. The phone rings with nobody on the other end. A bus arrives at the Krusty Krab in the middle of the night. And standing at the door is a figure matching the description of the hash-slinging slasher. But then the show pulls the rug. The slasher is just a new employee looking for a job. The lights were flickering because Nosferatu was playing with the light switch. It was all coincidence. Squidward made up the story. There's no ghost. There's no curse. It's all perfectly rational. Except the show never explains everything. It explains the bus arrival and the lights, but it doesn't explain the phone call. The phone rings with nobody on the other end, and no explanation is ever given. And it doesn't explain how Nosferatu got into the Krusty Krab. And it doesn't explain why everything Squidward predicted happened to coincidentally come true at the exact time he predicted it. The theory is that Squidward didn't make up the story, or more precisely, that the story was real, and Squidward somehow knew it without knowing he knew it. That the hash-slinging slasher exists as a ghost or a legend within the SpongeBob universe, and Squidward channeled the real story without realizing it. The coincidences weren't coincidences. They were the legend manifesting. The show just happened to provide rational explanations for most of it to maintain its status as a children's show. And I love this reading because of what it says about horror in SpongeBob. The show frequently dips into genuine horror. Rock Bottom is terrifying. SB-129 has moments of existential dread. Graveyard Shift is genuinely scary. And the way the show handles horror is by acknowledging it and then undercutting it. It says, yes, this is scary, and then says, but it's also funny. And the tension between the scare and the laugh is what makes those episodes so memorable. But the unresolved elements, the unexplained phone call, the presence of Nosferatu, those suggest that the horror isn't entirely undercut. That beneath the laugh, the scare is still there. That SpongeBob's world has genuine darkness in it, and the show's cheerful surface is just barely containing it. And we're going to sit with that for a minute, because I think it leads us to the most important question about SpongeBob conspiracy theories in general. Why do we want SpongeBob to be dark? Think about it. Every theory we've discussed tonight, from the nuclear origins to the 7 deadly sins to the purgatory theory, they all have one thing in common. They argue that SpongeBob is darker than it appears. They take a happy show and find sadness in it. They take a colorful world and find shadows. They take innocence and find corruption. And I think the reason is this. We grew up with SpongeBob. Many of us watched it as children, in that period of life when everything was simpler and more colorful and more fun. And then we grew up. We entered the real world with its complexity and darkness and disappointment. And now, when we look back at SpongeBob, we can't see it the way we saw it as kids. We can't unsee the complexity. We can't pretend we don't know about nuclear testing and capitalism and depression. So we project that knowledge back onto the show. We find dark theories because we've become dark viewers. The show didn't change. We did. And there's something bittersweet about that, because SpongeBob was created to be joyful. Stephen Hillenberg made it because he loved the ocean, and he loved animation, and he wanted to make people laugh. The darkness that fans find in it is largely a reflection of their own experiences, not the show's intentions. And the fact that the show is flexible enough, deep enough, rich enough to support all of these interpretations is a testament to its quality. But I think it's worth remembering, every once in a while, that sometimes a sponge is just a sponge. And sometimes a cartoon about a sponge is just a cartoon about a sponge that happens to make millions of people happy. But you know what? I'm not done. Not even close. Because we've covered the big theories, the famous ones, the ones that everybody talks about. And now, I want to get into the ones that are more obscure. The ones that don't get YouTube videos made about them. The ones that live in the deep corners of Reddit and fan forums and late-night Discord conversations. The theories that only the truly devoted even know about. Let's start with one that I find genuinely compelling. The theory that Squidward is actually talented. Wait, I know what you're thinking. Squidward is supposed to be untalented. That's one of the show's running jokes. He plays the clarinet badly. He paints terrible self-portraits. His artistic ambitions consistently exceed his abilities, right? But think about it more carefully. Who says Squidward is untalented? SpongeBob, who has no artistic taste. Patrick, who can't even remember his own name sometimes. The random citizens of Bikini Bottom, who are depicted throughout the show as shallow and uncultured. The only people who evaluate Squidward's art are people who aren't qualified to evaluate art. And there are moments in the show that suggest Squidward's work actually is good. In Band Geeks, when Squidward conducts the marching band's performance of Sweet Victory, the crowd goes wild. The performance is genuinely impressive. And while it's played as Squidward getting a win for once, the implication is that Squidward's musical vision, the thing he's been pursuing his entire life, is actually valid. He just needed the right players to execute it. The theory suggests that Squidward is a genuinely talented artist and musician, living in a town that's too unsophisticated to appreciate him. And his misery doesn't come from lack of talent. It comes from lack of recognition. He's a genius in a town of idiots. And the show's joke isn't that Squidward is bad at what he does. The joke is that nobody around him can tell the difference between good and bad. That's a much darker, much more interesting joke than, haha, he plays clarinet badly. And I've been turning this over in my head for weeks, and I think there's actually strong evidence for it. Look at the episode Squid Noir, which aired on November 11th, 2017, as part of Season 11. It's a black and white noir parody about Squidward searching for his stolen clarinet. And in that episode, Squidward's playing is depicted as genuinely beautiful. The music cues, the lighting, the atmosphere, everything in the episode's filmmaking language tells us that Squidward is good, really good. And it's only when other characters hear him that the joke kicks in and they don't appreciate it. That's not a joke about bad art. That's a joke about bad audiences. And the difference matters. Now, let me connect this to another underappreciated theory. The theory about the show's relationship with time. I mentioned earlier that SpongeBob's timeline is inconsistent, but there's a specific theory that goes deeper than just the writers don't care about continuity. The theory is that the characters in SpongeBob don't experience time the same way we do. They're aware of the passage of time. They celebrate holidays. They reference seasons. But they don't age. They don't develop. They don't change. And the theory suggests this is because Bikini Bottom exists in a kind of temporal loop. Think about it. SpongeBob has been a fry cook for 27 years of real time. He's never been promoted. He's never quit. He's never moved on. Squidward has been miserable for the same 27 years. Patrick has lived under the same rock. Nothing changes. Nothing progresses. And the theory is that this isn't just cartoon status quo. It's a feature of the world itself. Bikini Bottom is trapped in a loop, repeating the same patterns endlessly, and the characters are either unaware of it or unable to escape it. Connect this to the nuclear theory. If Bikini Bottom was created by nuclear radiation, if the sea creatures were mutated into sentience by atomic energy, then maybe the same radiation that gave them intelligence also trapped them in a temporal anomaly. They're alive, they're conscious, but they can't grow, they can't change. They're stuck in an endless present, reliving variations of the same day forever. Is this what the show intends? Almost certainly not. But it's a fascinating lens through which to view the repetitive nature of episodic cartoon storytelling. The reason nothing changes in SpongeBob is the same reason nothing changes in any episodic show. The format requires it. But by framing that format constraint as a feature of the in-universe reality, the theory transforms a limitation of the medium into a theme of the story. And I think that's kind of beautiful, even if it's entirely unintentional. Let me get into something I've been researching for weeks, and I can't believe more people don't talk about. The theory about Larry the Lobster. Larry is a minor recurring character. He's a lobster who works as a lifeguard at Goo Lagoon, Bikini Bottom's beach. He's buff. He's popular. He's the cool guy that everyone likes. And at first glance, he seems like nothing more than a simple background character designed to be the opposite of SpongeBob and Squidward, the physically perfect specimen in a world of imperfect creatures. But some fans have noticed something strange about Larry. He never ages, like everyone else, but he also never seems to fully participate in Bikini Bottom's social dynamics. He's always on the periphery. He's at the beach. He's at parties. He's seen around town, but he's never at the center of any major event. He's an observer, not a participant. The theory suggests that Larry represents the ideal self that the other characters are chasing. For SpongeBob, Larry represents physical confidence. For Squidward, Larry represents social acceptance. For Mr. Krabs, Larry represents success without moral compromise. Larry is everything the main characters want to be, but aren't. And the fact that he's a lobster, specifically, matters. Lobsters are biologically fascinating creatures. They continue to grow throughout their lives. They can regenerate limbs. Some scientists have suggested that lobsters show negligible senescence, meaning they don't appear to age in the traditional sense. So Larry the Lobster, theoretically immortal, perpetually fit, always watching from the sidelines, becomes a kind of mythological figure in Bikini Bottom. He's the character who doesn't need anything. He doesn't need money, like Mr. Krabs. He doesn't need validation, like Squidward. He doesn't need friendship like SpongeBob. He's complete. And his completeness, his lack of need, is exactly what makes him a background character. Characters who are complete have no stories. Stories require conflict. Conflict requires desire. And Larry desires nothing. I find this theory kind of hilarious, honestly, because it takes a character who is essentially decoration, a visual joke about stereotypical lifeguards, and transforms him into the most enlightened being in Bikini Bottom. And again, I don't think the writers intended any of this, but the fact that you can construct this reading speaks to the density of the show's world. Every character, even the minor ones, has enough detail to support a theory. Speaking of minor characters and theories, let me tell you about one that involves the fish who has appeared in the background of almost every single episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. Fans call him Fred, although the show has never officially given him that name consistently. Fred is the fish who usually shouts, "My leg," whenever something catastrophic happens in Bikini Bottom. He's been stepped on, crushed, burned, exploded, and injured in virtually every way possible across hundreds of episodes. And the running gag of his constant injury has become one of the show's most enduring bits. But here's where it gets interesting. The show eventually acknowledged Fred and his leg problem. In Season 11, the episode My Leg aired on June 2nd, 2018, and was entirely dedicated to Fred and his perpetually injured leg. The episode reveals that Fred's leg problems have become a defining part of his identity. He's gone to the hospital so many times that the staff knows him by name. His leg has been broken so frequently that it's essentially a running joke within the show's own universe. And the meta-conspiracy theory about Fred is that he's the show's self-referential commentary on its own formula. Fred represents the thing that gets hurt over and over again, the thing that always breaks, the thing that never heals. He's a metaphor for the show itself, specifically the parts of the show that get repeated endlessly, the same jokes, the same dynamics, the same character relationships. Fred's leg breaks because SpongeBob's formula breaks, and he keeps coming back, just like the show keeps coming back, because the formula works. It's broken, but it works. Now, I realize I've been going through these theories at a pretty fast clip, and I want to slow down and sit with one that I think deserves more space. It's the theory about Sandy Cheeks and what she really represents. Sandy is the only land animal in Bikini Bottom. She's a squirrel from Texas who lives underwater in a glass dome called the Tree Dome, which is filled with air and contains a tree that she lives in. She wears a spacesuit-like diving outfit when she leaves the Tree Dome. She's a scientist, an inventor, and a martial artist. And she's fiercely proud of her Texas heritage. The standard reading of Sandy is that she represents the outsider. She's literally a fish out of water, or rather, a squirrel in water. She doesn't belong. She has to create her own environment just to survive. And the show uses her foreignness as a source of both comedy and genuine cultural commentary. There's the episode Texas, Season 1, Episode 18A, where Sandy gets so homesick that she decides to leave Bikini Bottom and go back to Texas. And the episode plays her homesickness completely straight. It's not a joke. It's a genuine emotional arc about the pain of living far from home, surrounded by people who don't understand where you come from. But the conspiracy theory version goes further. Some fans believe Sandy represents colonialism. She's a land creature who came to the underwater world to study its inhabitants. She brought her own culture with her. She built her own enclosure on someone else's land. She treats the ocean creatures as subjects of study. And despite being the newcomer, she often positions herself as superior, smarter, stronger, more capable than the sea creatures who were there first. I want to be careful with this theory because I don't think it's what Hillenberg intended. And I think applying post-colonial theory to a Nickelodeon cartoon requires some heavy caveats. Sandy is a positive character. She's kind. She's brave. She's a good friend. She's not depicted as an exploiter or an oppressor, but the structural elements of her character, land creature studying sea creatures, bringing her own environment into someone else's world, maintaining her cultural identity while existing in a foreign space, those elements do map onto colonial dynamics. And the fact that they do is interesting even if it's accidental. Hillenberg created Sandy because he wanted a land creature in the cast. He was a marine biologist who thought it would be interesting to have a character who wasn't native to the ocean, And the reason she's a squirrel from Texas is probably as simple as Hillenberg finding that combination funny. But the theory reminds us that characters don't exist in a vacuum. They carry cultural weight, whether their creators intend it or not. Okay, I need to talk about something that I've been putting off because it's complicated, and I want to handle it carefully. The theory about SpongeBob SquarePants and race. This theory argues that the characters of SpongeBob can be read as representing different racial dynamics in American society. SpongeBob, the eager worker who is exploited by his employer, represents the working-class minority experience. Mr. Krabs, the wealthy boss who extracts labor from others, represents the white ruling class. Sandy, the outsider who has to prove herself in a world that doesn't fully accept her, represents the immigrant experience. And Squidward, the cultured individual whose sophistication is dismissed by those around him, represents the experience of Black Americans whose contributions to art and culture are undervalued. Now, I want to be very clear about something. I don't think Stephen Hillenberg designed these characters with race in mind. I don't think SpongeBob SquarePants is secretly about race. And I think applying racial readings to a cartoon about sea creatures requires acknowledging that you're bringing your own interpretive framework to the text, not uncovering something the creators hid. But I also think the theory has value as a thought exercise. Art doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's created within a culture, and it reflects that culture, whether the creators intend it to or not. The dynamics between SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs, between Sandy and the citizens of Bikini Bottom, between Squidward and everyone around him, these dynamics exist in a cultural context, and reading them through a racial lens, even if it's not what the creators intended, can reveal things about how power, labor, and cultural value operate in the society that produced the show. I bring this up not because I think it's the definitive reading of SpongeBob, but because I think it's important to acknowledge that conspiracy theories aren't just about finding hidden meanings. They're about bringing our own experiences to art and seeing what resonates. And for viewers whose lived experiences involve racial dynamics, it's natural and valid to see those dynamics reflected in the media they consume, even in a cartoon about a sponge. Now, let me take us somewhere completely different. I want to talk about one of the strangest and most specific theories in the SpongeBob fandom. The theory about SB129. SB129 is Season 1, Episode 14A. It aired on December 31st, 1999, literally the last day of the 20th century. And it's one of the weirdest episodes of SpongeBob's first season. Squidward, trying to escape SpongeBob and Patrick, hides in the Krusty Krab's freezer and accidentally cryogenically freezes himself. He wakes up 2,000 years in the future, in a chrome-colored world where everything is automated. He discovers a time machine, travels back to the distant past, and accidentally invents the concept of jellyfishing, which leads to the creation of Bikini Bottom's culture as we know it. And the theory is this: Squidward created Bikini Bottom, not literally, not physically, but culturally. By traveling to the past and introducing the concept of play, specifically jellyfishing, to the primitive sea creatures he encountered, Squidward kick-started the cultural development that eventually produced the Bikini Bottom we see in the show. Without Squidward's accidental intervention, the show's world wouldn't exist. Think about the irony of that. Squidward, the character who hates Bikini Bottom, who wishes he lived anywhere else, who considers himself above the town and everyone in it, is the reason the town exists in the first place. He created the culture that torments him. He's trapped in a world of his own making, and he doesn't even know it. And there's a deeper layer to SB129 that the show itself seems aware of. When Squidward is in the future, he encounters a world that's perfect in the way he always wanted. Orderly, quiet, and free of SpongeBob and Patrick. But it's also empty. It's lifeless. It's a world with no chaos, no noise, no annoyance, and also no warmth, no friendship, no joy. Squidward gets what he wants, and it's awful. And I think that's the show's quiet thesis about Squidward's character. He thinks he wants solitude and order, but what he actually needs is exactly what he has: a messy, noisy, annoying world full of people who care about him, even when he doesn't want them to. And let me use that as a bridge to talk about something that I think is one of the most powerful moments in the entire show. And I've been thinking about it constantly while making this video. The ending of Pizza Delivery. Pizza Delivery is Season 1, Episode 5A. It aired on August 14th, 1999. SpongeBob and Squidward are tasked with delivering a pizza to a customer. They get lost. Squidward is miserable. SpongeBob is enthusiastic. It's the standard dynamic. But the ending is where the episode becomes something more than a comedy. They finally arrive at the customer's house. SpongeBob has been protecting this pizza with his life. He's been through a sandstorm. He's been stranded in the middle of nowhere. And through all of it, he's kept the pizza safe because delivering it is his job, and his job matters to him. They get to the door. The customer opens it. And instead of being grateful, the customer complains that they didn't bring him a drink. He yells at SpongeBob. He berates him. He's cruel. And SpongeBob crumbles. His lip trembles. His eyes fill with tears. He worked so hard. He went through so much. And it wasn't enough. The customer didn't care. And then Squidward does something extraordinary. Squidward, who has spent the entire episode complaining, who has been hostile and dismissive and miserable. Squidward takes the pizza and slams it in the customer's face. And then he takes SpongeBob inside to eat the pizza themselves. And here's what kills me about that moment. It's Squidward. Squidward is the one who stands up for SpongeBob. The character who spends most of the show expressing barely concealed contempt for SpongeBob is the one who, in that moment, genuinely cares about him. And the show doesn't make a big deal of it. Squidward doesn't give a speech about friendship. He doesn't have a change of heart. He just sees his colleague, his neighbor, this annoying little sponge that he lives next to, in pain. And he acts. That's it. One moment of genuine, wordless compassion from the least compassionate character on the show. And I think that moment is more powerful than any conspiracy theory could be, because it tells you everything you need to know about Squidward. He's not evil. He's not heartless. He's not just wrath personified, or depression embodied, or whatever theory you want to apply. He's a person, a complicated, grumpy, unhappy person who, when it actually matters, does the right thing. And the show gave us that in the 5th episode. Before anyone had time to theorize about what Squidward represents, the show had already shown us who he actually is. I need to keep going, because there are more theories that I think deserve attention. And one of them has to do with something I find genuinely strange about the SpongeBob universe. The existence of Goo Lagoon. Goo Lagoon is a beach in Bikini Bottom. It's a beach, underwater, where fish go swimming, in goo. They're fish, they live in water, and they go to a beach to swim in a different liquid. Think about how insane that is. The show has a beach underwater, and nobody in the show questions it. They put on swimsuits, they lay on towels, they build sandcastles, they do everything you do at a regular beach, except they're already underwater. Now, the surface level explanation is that it's a joke. It's the show applying human conventions to an underwater world for comedic effect. And that's fine. That is the explanation. But the conspiracy theory version is more interesting. Some fans have theorized that Goo Lagoon is actually a brine pool. Brine pools are real underwater formations where super concentrated saltwater collects on the ocean floor, creating a distinct body of liquid within the ocean. They look like underwater lakes. They have shores. They have surfaces. If you were an underwater creature looking at a brine pool, it would look exactly like a body of water, which it is, just a different density of water than the surrounding ocean. Fish actually avoid brine pools because the extreme salinity can be toxic. The theory suggests that Goo Lagoon is a brine pool, and that Stephen Hillenberg, being a marine biologist, knew exactly what a brine pool was when he created the concept. The goo that the fish swim in isn't just a random cartoon substance. It's super concentrated brine. And the beach exists because brine pools have actual shores where the brine meets the regular ocean floor. Everything about Goo Lagoon has a real scientific basis, hidden beneath the cartoon absurdity. And I think this is the kind of theory that Hillenberg would have appreciated, even if it gives him more credit for scientific accuracy than he probably deserves in a specific instance, because it reflects the same approach he brought to the entire show, taking real marine biology and filtering it through cartoon logic. Whether or not Goo Lagoon is specifically a brine pool, the fact that it can be read as one is a direct result of Hillenberg's scientific background informing his creative decisions. Alright, let me talk about one of the more recent theories that's been gaining traction in the SpongeBob community. The theory that post-season 9B SpongeBob The episodes made after Hillenberg returned are deliberately referencing and correcting the mistakes of the middle seasons. This theory suggests that when Hillenberg came back to the show, he was aware of the criticism that seasons 4 through 9A had received. He knew about the Flanderization. He knew about the mean-spiritedness. He knew about the quality decline. And rather than simply pretending those seasons didn't happen, he deliberately course-corrected by writing episodes that addressed, or even retconned, the damage done during his absence. Fans point to specific examples. Characters in the post-Hillenberg return episodes behave more like their season 1 to 3 selves. Mr. Krab's greed is still present, but less psychopathic. Patrick is dumb, but not aggressively cruel. SpongeBob is enthusiastic, but not annoying. The tone shifts from mean-spirited to warm-hearted, and some fans believe these changes are too consistent and too specific to be accidental. They believe Hillenberg had a plan to fix his show. I find this theory compelling because it gives Hillenberg credit for caring about his creation, even after stepping away from it. And the evidence supports it, at least partially. The quality did improve after his return. The characters did feel more like themselves. But whether this was the result of a deliberate corrective strategy or simply the natural result of the show's original creator being involved again, I can't say for certain. What I can say is that the fact that fans noticed the improvement and attributed it to Hillenberg's influence tells you how important he was to the show. SpongeBob SquarePants, without Stephen Hillenberg, was recognizably different from SpongeBob SquarePants with Stephen Hillenberg. And that's the ultimate testament to his creative vision. He wasn't just the creator, he was the ingredient that made the formula work. Without him, the Krabby Patty just didn't taste the same. Okay, I've been going for a while now, and I want to take us into the final stretch of theories. But before I do, I need to address something that I've been thinking about throughout this entire video. And it's the meta question that underlies every conspiracy theory about every piece of media. Why do we do this? Why do we take a children's cartoon and spend hours analyzing it for hidden meanings? Why do we construct elaborate theories about nuclear testing and deadly sins and drug use and capitalism? Why do we refuse to accept that SpongeBob is just a funny show about a sponge? And I think the answer is simpler than most people think. We do it because the show is good enough to support it. Bad shows don't generate conspiracy theories. Nobody is constructing elaborate fan theories about forgettable cartoons from the early 2000s. The theories exist because the source material is rich enough, complex enough, well-crafted enough to sustain multiple readings. Every theory we've discussed tonight, from the most credible to the most absurd, is built on genuine details from the show. Real moments, real character traits, real production choices. The theories might be wrong about the creator's intentions, but they're never wrong about the evidence. The evidence is there. It was always there. And I think that's the real conspiracy, if there is one. The conspiracy is that Stephen Hillenberg was so good at his job that he accidentally created one of the most analyzed pieces of media in human history. He wanted to make a funny cartoon about a sea sponge, and he ended up making something that people would still be picking apart a quarter of a century later. That's not a hidden meaning. That's just exceptional craftsmanship. Now let me talk about a few more theories before we start winding down, because I want to cover some ground that I don't think gets enough attention. The theory about the color of SpongeBob's tie. SpongeBob wears a brown square tie. It's one of his most distinctive visual features. And some fans have theorized that the tie represents his connection to the land, specifically to the world above the ocean. In a world of fish and sea creatures, a tie is a human garment. It's something that belongs on the surface, not underwater. And SpongeBob wears it every day, without question, as if it's the most natural thing in the world. The theory suggests that SpongeBob's tie, along with his square pants and his shoes, are artifacts of the human world that sank to the ocean floor. The underwater creatures adopted human customs, human clothing, human social structures, without understanding where they came from. They wear ties because the objects exist in their world, not because they understand the cultural significance of neckwear. And SpongeBob, being the most enthusiastic and uncritical character, embraced these human artifacts more fully than anyone else. This connects back to the nuclear theory. If Bikini Bottom's culture developed in the shadow of human nuclear testing, then it makes sense that human objects would be scattered across the ocean floor. The show depicts this constantly. There are human objects everywhere in Bikini Bottom. Cars, televisions, buildings, furniture, all of it designed for human use and adapted for underwater life. The characters of SpongeBob live in the wreckage of human civilization, and they don't know it. They think this is just how the world works. And I think that might be the darkest interpretation of all. Not the 7 deadly sins, not the purgatory theory, not the drugs theory. The darkest interpretation of SpongeBob SquarePants is that its characters are living in the ruins of a civilization that destroyed itself, wearing the dead culture's clothing, mimicking the dead culture's customs, and having no idea that any of it is secondhand. They think they built this world. They didn't. It was built above them, and it fell on them, and they put on the pieces and called it home. Alright, I want to talk about one more major theory, and then I'm going to bring everything together. The theory about the Flying Dutchman. The Flying Dutchman is a recurring character in SpongeBob SquarePants. He's a ghost pirate who lives in a spectral ship and collects souls. He's based on the legend of the Flying Dutchman, a ghost ship that was said to appear to sailors as an omen of doom. And in SpongeBob, he's depicted as powerful, menacing, and occasionally pathetic. The theory about the Flying Dutchman connects to the nuclear theory and the purgatory theory simultaneously. It goes like this. If the characters of Bikini Bottom are the product of nuclear mutation, and if their world exists in the aftermath of atomic testing, then the Flying Dutchman represents the pre-nuclear past. He's a ghost. He's from a time before the tests. He remembers what the ocean was like before the radiation, before the mutation, before the talking sea creatures, and his anger, his desire to collect souls, his antagonism toward the living creatures of Bikini Bottom. It all stems from the fact that they shouldn't exist. They're an aberration. They're the unintended consequences of something terrible. And the Flying Dutchman, as a being who predates the contamination, resents them for it. Is this what the show intends? No, obviously not. The Flying Dutchman is a comedy character. He's played for laughs more often than for scares. But the theory works because it connects multiple elements of the show's lore into a coherent narrative. The nuclear testing created the sentient creatures. The sentient creatures built Bikini Bottom. And the Flying Dutchman, a remnant of the pre-contamination ocean, exists as a reminder that this world isn't natural. It's artificial. It's the accidental byproduct of human violence. And the ghosts of the old world are still sailing through it, watching, judging, collecting the souls of creatures that were never supposed to exist. I need to take a breath here, because that's heavy. And I want to remind you that SpongeBob is a show where Patrick once forgot the word for head and called it a torso top. It's a show where SpongeBob and Patrick blew a bubble shaped like an elephant, and it flew away and made trumpet noises. It's a show where Mr. Krabs' arch nemesis is 1 inch tall and married to a computer. These are the same characters we've been constructing nuclear theology around, and I think it's important to hold both of those realities simultaneously. SpongeBob is silly. SpongeBob is deep, and neither reality negates the other. Let me talk about one more thing that I've been saving, because I think it's the perfect way to start bringing all of this together. The theory about SpongeBob's laugh. SpongeBob's laugh is one of the most recognizable sounds in all of animation. That weird, high-pitched, rapid-fire laugh that Tom Kenny performs with such precision that it's become iconic. And some fans have theorized that SpongeBob's laugh isn't just a character trait, it's a defense mechanism. The theory goes like this. SpongeBob laughs at everything. Appropriate things, inappropriate things, sad things, scary things, confusing things. He laughs when he's happy, obviously, but he also laughs when he's uncomfortable, when he's scared, when he doesn't know what else to do. His laugh fills silences. It smooths over awkwardness. It transforms tense situations into benign ones. And the theory suggests that this constant compulsive laughter is SpongeBob's way of coping with a world that is, beneath its colorful surface, genuinely frightening. Think about what SpongeBob's life is actually like. He lives at the bottom of the ocean, in a world where sea creatures have been mutated into sentience by nuclear radiation. His boss exploits him. His neighbor hates him. His best friend can barely think. The woman who teaches him to drive has a criminal past and a dead husband. The local restaurant owner might be serving his own species as food. There are ghosts. There are monsters. The laws of physics don't apply consistently. And through all of it, SpongeBob laughs. And the theory suggests that the laugh isn't joy. It's survival. It's the sound of a creature who has, on some instinctive level, understood that the only way to exist in this world is to refuse to take it seriously. If SpongeBob stopped laughing, if he really looked at his world clearly, if he processed the horror and the absurdity and the darkness without the filter of his relentless optimism, he wouldn't be able to function. The laugh keeps him going. It's not a sign of happiness. It's a sign of resilience. And that, I think, is the most powerful reading of SpongeBob SquarePants that any conspiracy theory has ever produced. Not that the show is dark. Not that the characters represent sins, or mental illnesses, or nuclear mutations, but that SpongeBob's optimism, his signature trait, the thing that defines him above all else, is itself a coping mechanism, a way of surviving a world that doesn't make sense, a way of finding joy in the ruins. And isn't that what we all do? Don't we all laugh at things that scare us? Don't we all find ways to be happy in situations that, if examined too closely, would overwhelm us? SpongeBob's laugh is our laugh. His optimism is our optimism. His refusal to see the darkness, or rather, his ability to see the darkness and laugh at it anyway, that's not naivete. That's courage. I realize I've been going for quite a while, and if you're still here, I really appreciate it. We've covered a lot of ground tonight, but I'm not done yet. There are still theories I want to explore, connections I want to make, and moments from the show that I think deserve attention. Let me talk about the theory of the two SpongeBobs. This theory argues that SpongeBob's character is fundamentally different, depending on whether you're watching the pre-movie era or the post-movie era, and that the difference is so significant that they might as well be two different characters. Pre-movie SpongeBob is optimistic, but not oblivious. He gets hurt. He feels pain. He understands when he's being rejected. He has moments of genuine sadness and vulnerability. Post-movie SpongeBob, according to this theory, doesn't feel those things. He's an emotional flat line of enthusiasm. He can't be hurt because he doesn't process negative emotions. He's not a character, he's a mascot. And the theory connects this to a broader argument about what happened to SpongeBob as a show. The argument is that Nickelodeon didn't just continue the show after Hillenberg left. They replaced it. They took the characters, the setting, the animation style, and the name, and they created something fundamentally different. Same brand, different product. Like a restaurant that changes ownership and keeps the old menu, but uses cheaper ingredients. It looks the same. It tastes different. I think this theory has some merit, especially when you look at specific examples side by side. Compare SpongeBob's reaction to rejection in Pizza Delivery, where he's genuinely heartbroken, to similar scenes in later seasons, where he's oblivious or immediately moves on. The emotional register is different. The character processes negative events differently. And whether that's Flanderization, deliberate creative choice, or just the natural result of different writers interpreting the character differently, the end result is a SpongeBob who feels less human, less relatable, and less emotionally complex than the one Hillenberg created. But I also want to push back against the more extreme version of this theory, because even in the weaker seasons, there are episodes that capture SpongeBob's original spirit. There are moments of genuine emotion. There are episodes where the characters feel like themselves again. The show never completely lost what made it special. It just lost consistency. And the difference between a show that's consistently great and a show that's occasionally great is significant. But it's not the same as the difference between two different shows. Let me talk about something that I find genuinely spooky, and I don't use that word lightly. The theory about SpongeBob's house number. SpongeBob's address is 124 Conch Street. 124. And some fans have pointed out that 124 is a significant number in the context of the nuclear theory. The first nuclear test at Bikini Atoll, Operation Crossroads, involved 2 detonations. The first, called Able, occurred on July 1st, 1946, and 1 + 2 + 4 = 7. July is the 7th month. Is this a coincidence? Almost certainly. But it's the kind of coincidence that conspiracy theorists love. And I'll admit that when I first read about it, I got chills. Because in a show created by a marine biologist who was intimately familiar with what nuclear testing did to the ocean, numerical references to the testing's timeline don't feel entirely random. Again, I want to be clear. I think this is probably a coincidence. I don't think Hillenberg chose SpongeBob's address based on nuclear testing dates. But the fact that the connection exists, that you can draw a line between 124 Conch Street and the Bikini Atoll tests, even if it's a tenuous line, is another example of how SpongeBob's world is dense enough to support connections that may or may not be intentional. And I think that density is the key to understanding why SpongeBob generates so many conspiracy theories. The show's world is so carefully constructed, with so much attention to detail, that every element can be connected to every other element if you're creative enough. It's a conspiracy theorist's playground, and the playground was built by a man who cared deeply about every single detail of his creation. Now, let me move on to what I think is one of the most interesting recent developments in SpongeBob conspiracy theory culture, the Alex Bale phenomenon. Alex Bale is a YouTube creator who built a massive following by creating elaborate SpongeBob conspiracy theory videos. His series, originally called SpongeBob Conspiracy, later renamed Don't Feed the Muse, took fan theories about SpongeBob to an entirely new level. Bale didn't just discuss existing theories. He created new ones, assembling evidence from across the show's entire run to build arguments that were so detailed and so well researched that they felt genuinely convincing. And then, the series took a meta-turn. Bale introduced a narrative element where a mysterious entity called the Muse was providing him with the information he needed to make his videos. The series became an ARG, an alternate reality game, blending real SpongeBob analysis with fictional horror elements. And by the time the series reached its conclusion, it had become something entirely unique. A SpongeBob conspiracy theory series that was itself a conspiracy. What fascinates me about Bale's work is how it reflects the broader culture of SpongeBob analysis. The fact that someone could build a successful creative career entirely on the back of SpongeBob conspiracy theories tells you how deep the well goes. The show has generated enough material, enough detail, enough ambiguity, that an entire genre of content has emerged around analyzing it. And that genre has, in turn, generated its own lore, its own mythology, its own theories about theories. We're through the looking glass at this point. We're not just talking about a cartoon anymore. We're talking about a cultural ecosystem that the cartoon spawned. And the fact that SpongeBob can support that kind of recursive, self-referential analysis is, once again, a testament to the density and richness of Hillenberg's creation. Let me talk about something that I've been waiting to bring up: the voice actors and the theories about their influence on the characters. Tom Kenny voices SpongeBob, and we've talked about his interpretation of the character. But the other voice actors deserve attention too, because the theory is that their performances, their personal interpretations, their ad-libs and improvisations have shaped the characters in ways that go beyond what the scripts specify. Bill Fagerbakke voices Patrick Star, and Fagerbakke has brought a warmth to Patrick that transcends the character's stupidity. When Patrick says something dumb, it doesn't feel cruel or mocking. It feels genuine. And Fagerbakke has talked about finding the heart in Patrick's simplicity, about playing him as someone who truly doesn't understand, rather than someone who's willfully ignorant. That choice, that vocal performance choice, is the difference between Patrick being a beloved character and Patrick being an annoying one. Roger Bumpass voices Squidward Tentacles, and Bumpass's performance is, I think, one of the most underrated voice performances in animation history. Listen to the way he delivers Squidward's lines. There's genuine suffering in his voice, not just irritation. Suffering. When Squidward sighs, you can hear 20 years of disappointment in that sigh. Bumpass doesn't play Squidward as an angry character. He plays him as a tired one, and there's a world of difference between the two. Clancy Brown voices Mr. Krabs. And what Brown brings to the character is surprising. He makes Mr. Krabs likable. Despite being the most morally compromised character in the main cast, Mr. Krabs remains endearing because Brown's performance has a rough warmth to it. He sounds like a real working-class guy, a little rough around the edges, a little too focused on money, but fundamentally human. If Mr. Krabs' voice was cold or calculating, the character would be a villain. But Brown makes him sound like your uncle, who's a little too cheap at restaurants, but would still give you the shirt off his back if you really needed it. Mr. Lawrence voices Plankton, and also served as a writer on the show, and his dual role is interesting from a conspiracy theory standpoint. Lawrence has deep insight into both the character's voice and the show's creative direction. When he confirmed the nuclear theory and commented on the 7 deadly sins theory, he was speaking from a position of genuine authority. He's not just an actor interpreting someone else's creation. He helped create it. Carolyn Lawrence voices Sandy Cheeks, and her performance brings a specific energy to Sandy that grounds the character's potentially outlandish premise. A squirrel from Texas living underwater could be played as a joke character, an extended bit about fish out of water culture clash. But Lawrence gives Sandy a confidence and competence that makes her feel like a real person, not a gimmick. Sandy's Texas accent and her occasional yawls aren't punchlines in Lawrence's performance. They're identity markers. They're who she is. The theory about the voice actor's influence is essentially this. The characters of SpongeBob SquarePants are collaborative creations. They exist on the page in the scripts, but they come alive through performance. And the specific performers Hillenberg chose, their individual interpretations, their improvisations, their choices about emphasis and timing and emotion, those performances are as much a part of the characters as anything Hillenberg wrote. SpongeBob isn't just a character designed by Hillenberg. He's a character performed by Tom Kenny. And the gap between the design and the performance, the space where Kenny's own personality and instincts color the character, that gap is where SpongeBob becomes truly alive. I want to bring up one more theory that I think ties together everything we've been talking about. And it's the simplest theory of all. The theory that SpongeBob SquarePants is exactly what it appears to be. No hidden meanings. No secret symbolism. No nuclear conspiracies, or deadly sins, or purgatory. Just a cartoon about a sponge who lives in a pineapple and loves his job and annoys his neighbor. A show created by a marine biologist who loved the ocean and wanted to make people laugh. A piece of art that means nothing more and nothing less than what it shows you. And here's the conspiracy theory twist. This might be the most radical interpretation of all. In a culture obsessed with finding hidden meanings, with looking below the surface, with refusing to accept anything at face value, the idea that something might just be what it appears to be is almost subversive. We're so trained to look for deeper meanings that simple sincerity feels suspicious. SpongeBob is happy. That's it. He's a happy character in a happy show. And his happiness isn't a mask. It isn't a coping mechanism. It isn't a symptom of some deeper condition. It's just happiness. The show celebrates joy, enthusiasm, friendship, and the simple pleasures of a simple life. And maybe the most important thing about SpongeBob SquarePants isn't what it hides. It's what it shows. Openly, honestly, without pretense. A sponge who loves his friends. A sponge who loves his job. A sponge who wakes up every morning and says, "I'm ready," with complete, genuine conviction. And 27 years later, millions of people still watch him do it. I want to talk about something else now, because there's another major theory that we haven't fully explored yet. The theory about what the Krusty Krab really is. We've talked about the Krusty Krab being shaped like a lobster trap, and we've talked about the Krabby Patty secret formula. But there's a broader theory about the Krusty Krab that I think is worth examining. The theory that the Krusty Krab isn't just a restaurant, it's a cult. Now hear me out. What are the characteristics of a cult? Charismatic leader who controls the group, Mr. Krabs. Devotion from members that goes beyond rational self-interest, SpongeBob. Exploitation of labor dressed up as purpose, the entire premise. Isolation from outside influences, SpongeBob rarely leaves the Krusty Krab orbit. An in-group/out-group mentality, the Krusty Krab versus the chum bucket. And a central artifact or text that is guarded obsessively and never questioned. The secret formula. SpongeBob doesn't work at the Krusty Krab the way a normal person works at a normal job. He worships the Krusty Krab. He defines himself through his role there. He would literally die for the job. He has panic attacks when he can't go to work. He sees the act of flipping Krabby Patties not as labor, but as sacred duty. And Mr. Krabs encourages this devotion because it benefits him. He never corrects SpongeBob's perception. He never suggests that maybe SpongeBob should have interests outside of work. He maintains SpongeBob's fanatical dedication because it means he gets an employee who works harder than any rational person would for less pay than any employer should legally be able to offer. The cult reading of the Krusty Krab reframes the entire SpongeBob/Mr. Krabs dynamic. Mr. Krabs isn't just SpongeBob's boss. He's his cult leader. And SpongeBob's happiness, his famous optimism, isn't genuine fulfillment. It's the manufactured contentment of someone who's been psychologically manipulated into believing their exploitation is a privilege. I'm not saying I fully endorse this theory. I think it takes genuine elements of the show's dynamics and pushes them further than the text supports. SpongeBob's love for his job is played as an authentic, positive character trait, not as brainwashing. But I think the theory is interesting because it highlights the uncomfortable reality that the show dances around but never directly addresses. SpongeBob's labor is being exploited. Regardless of whether he's happy about it, the economic relationship between SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs is objectively unfair, and the show invites us to laugh at this rather than question it. Now let me shift to something completely different. I want to talk about a pattern in SpongeBob episodes that I don't think anyone has fully articulated. The pattern of transformation. Think about how many SpongeBob episodes involve a character being physically transformed. SpongeBob turns into a snail. Squidward turns into a baby. Patrick switches brains with SpongeBob. Characters become giant, miniature, invisible, magnetic, radioactive. The show is obsessed with transformation, and the theory is that this obsession reflects a deeper anxiety about identity. In I Was a Teenage Gary, Season 1, Episode 13B, which aired on October 28, 1999, SpongeBob accidentally injects himself with snail plasma and begins transforming into a snail. It's played as body horror. It's genuinely unsettling. SpongeBob's body changes against his will, and he can't stop it. His identity is being erased by physical transformation, and the episode doesn't resolve this comfortably. It doesn't end with a lesson or a clean fix. It just ends. And I think the reason the show returns to transformation so frequently is that transformation is the opposite of the show's fundamental comfort, stability. SpongeBob's world is defined by consistency, the same house, the same job, the same friends, the same routine, and transformation threatens all of that. When a character transforms, they're ripped out of their stable world and forced into something unfamiliar. And the horror of that, the genuine discomfort the show generates from transformation episodes, comes from the violation of the status quo that the audience has come to depend on. Connect this to the temporal loop theory I mentioned earlier. If Bikini Bottom is stuck in a loop, then transformation represents the loop breaking. It's entropy invading a world of order. It's change penetrating a world designed to resist change. And the show always resolves these episodes by restoring the status quo, by putting everything back the way it was. Because in SpongeBob's world, change is the enemy, consistency is safety, and the show will always choose safety. I want to talk about one more character theory before I start wrapping things up, and it's about a character who I think is the most philosophically complex figure in the entire show. Karen Plankton. Karen is Plankton's computer wife. We've touched on her already, but I want to go deeper, because Karen might be the only genuinely self-aware character in SpongeBob SquarePants. Think about what Karen does throughout the show. She supports Plankton's schemes, yes, but she also constantly points out that those schemes won't work. She has the intelligence to see the futility of what Plankton is trying to do. She knows the Krabby Patty formula isn't going to make them successful. She knows Plankton is chasing an obsession, not a goal, and yet she stays. She helps. She participates in plans she knows will fail. Why? The theory is that Karen stays because she's the only character in the show who understands the fundamental truth of Bikini Bottom. Nothing ever changes. The same schemes fail in the same ways. The same characters make the same mistakes. The loop continues. And Karen, being a computer, can process this reality without the emotional denial that biological characters use to cope. She sees the pattern, she accepts it, and she stays because she loves Plankton. And love, in a world where nothing changes, is the only thing that matters. Karen is the conspiracy theorist of SpongeBob SquarePants. She's the one who sees the system. She understands the game. And she plays it anyway, not because she thinks she can win, but because the alternative, giving up, abandoning Plankton, accepting that nothing will ever get better, is worse than the futility of trying. And there's something in that reading that I find genuinely moving. In a show full of theories about darkness and hidden meanings, The most profound reading might be the one about a computer who chose love over logic, who saw the truth of her world, the pointlessness, the repetition, the inevitable failure, and decided that caring about someone was still worth it, even when nothing ever changes, even when every plan fails, even when the Krabby Patty formula remains forever out of reach. And honestly, Karen and Plankton's relationship is one of those things in the show that I think about randomly at like 2 a.m. because the name Karen itself carries so much weight now in internet culture that it's easy to forget she was named decades before Karen became a meme. She was just Plankton's computer wife, and the acronym Plankton gives her name, Wired Integrated Female Electroencephalograph. That's so absurdly scientific and simultaneously so obviously made up that it tells you everything about who Plankton is. He's the kind of person who gives his computer a scientific name to legitimize his loneliness. He turned his isolation into an experiment. He rebranded his lack of human connection as innovation. And Karen, to her eternal credit, decided to play along. She could have been cold. She could have been the stereotypical robotic AI voice. But instead, she developed sarcasm. She developed opinions. She developed something that looks remarkably like love. And that development, whether it's genuine sentience or just very sophisticated programming, is beside the point. The point is that Plankton needed someone, and Karen chose to be that someone, even though she can see the futility, even though she knows the plans won't work, even though she exists in a world where nothing ever changes, and the formula will never be stolen, and the chum bucket will never succeed. She stays, and that's enough. That's not dark. That's beautiful. And you know, I think Stephen Hillenberg understood that. I think he understood that the deepest truths aren't hidden. They're right there on the surface, if you know how to look. SpongeBob isn't deep because of nuclear theories, or deadly sins, or purgatory. It's deep because it's about a sponge who loves his life. It's about a starfish who loves his friend. It's about a squid who loves his clarinet, even though nobody else appreciates it. It's about a crab who loves money more than anything, but maybe, in the moments that matter most, loves his daughter just a little bit more. It's about a tiny plankton who loves a computer, and a computer who loves him back. Those are the real conspiracy theories, the ones hiding in plain sight. The ones that don't require elaborate analysis, or nuclear history, or theological frameworks. Just a simple, obvious truth that's so simple and obvious, we overlook it in our rush to find something deeper. SpongeBob SquarePants is a show about love. That's the secret formula. That's always been the secret formula. And I think if Stephen Hillenberg were here, he'd probably roll his eyes at all of these theories. He'd probably say something like, it's a show about a sponge. Don't overthink it. And he'd be right. And he'd also be wrong. Because the beauty of SpongeBob is that it works on every level. It works as a silly cartoon. It works as a cultural artifact. It works as a subject for conspiracy theories. It works as a sleep aid at 2 a.m. when you can't stop your brain from spinning. It works because it was made with love, by a person who loved what he was doing, for an audience he respected enough to not talk down to. And speaking of the people who made this show, let me tell you about something that I think doesn't get talked about enough. The animation itself. SpongeBob SquarePants' animation in the first 3 seasons is remarkably expressive. The characters don't just move. They stretch, squash, melt, explode, and reform in ways that push the boundaries of what cell animation can do. And this isn't random. Hillenberg studied experimental animation at CalArts. He was trained in the tradition of abstract and avant-garde animation, and he brought that sensibility to a mainstream children's cartoon. Look at the close-up reaction shots. SpongeBob's face in a moment of shock or disgust is drawn with incredible detail. Veins, wrinkles, hair follicles, all rendered in hyper-realistic style that contrasts sharply with the show's normally flat, simple aesthetic. These shots are called gross close-ups by the production team, and they're one of SpongeBob's most distinctive visual signatures. And they serve a specific purpose. They break the fourth wall of animation style. They remind the audience that these characters have physical bodies, that their expressions have weight, that their emotions are visceral. And the theory is that these gross close-ups are Hillenberg's experimental animation training breaking through the surface of a commercial product. They're moments where his CalArts education asserts itself, where the avant-garde artist inside the mainstream showrunner says, "I know you expect this to look a certain way, but let me show you something else for a second." Their artistic subversion disguised as visual comedy. I find this theory compelling because it connects to the larger pattern we've been discussing all night. SpongeBob works on multiple levels. It's a commercial product and an artistic statement. It's a children's cartoon and a piece of experimental animation. It's simple on the surface and complex underneath. And the gross close-ups are the visual equivalent of the show's dual nature. They're funny, and they're also artistically sophisticated. Both things are true simultaneously. And speaking of the animation, let me mention one more thing that I've been wanting to bring up. The theory about SpongeBob's color palette and what it communicates emotionally. The early seasons of SpongeBob use a very specific color palette. The ocean is a deep, rich blue. Bikini Bottom's buildings and streets use warm, saturated colors. SpongeBob himself is a bright, almost aggressive yellow. And the show uses color shifts to communicate mood in ways that most viewers never consciously register. When something scary happens, the palette shifts toward cooler, darker tones. When something joyful happens, the colors brighten. Rock Bottom is desaturated and dark, emphasizing SpongeBob's isolation. Band Geeks is warm and golden during the Sweet Victory performance, emphasizing triumph. The show's emotional storytelling isn't just in the writing and the performances, it's in the colors. The theory suggests that this color work was heavily influenced by Hillenberg's time at Cal Arts, specifically by his training under Jules Engel. Engel was known for his work on abstract and experimental films that used color as their primary narrative device. No dialogue, no characters, just color, movement, and emotion. And Hillenberg absorbed those lessons and applied them to a commercial cartoon in a way that most viewers never notice but always feel. And I think that's the ultimate hidden detail in SpongeBob SquarePants. Not a nuclear conspiracy, not a deadly sin assignment, not a purgatory theory. The hidden detail is that the show is, underneath everything, a work of experimental art disguised as mainstream entertainment. Hillenberg took his Cal Arts training, his marine biology education, his sense of humor, and his genuine love for the ocean. And he created something that functions simultaneously as a children's cartoon, a comedy masterpiece, and a piece of visual art. And the fact that almost nobody recognizes the third function, that people watch SpongeBob for decades without seeing the experimental animation techniques informing every frame, that's the biggest conspiracy of all. Not that SpongeBob is hiding something dark, but that it's hiding something beautiful. A work of art, right there in plain sight, dressed up in a square tie and brown pants, grinning at you from your television screen every Saturday morning. Hillenberg smuggled art into Saturday morning cartoons, and he got away with it for 27 years, and nobody noticed, because the art was too busy making them laugh. Now, before we start closing things out, I want to cover a few more theories and observations that I think are essential to any serious discussion of SpongeBob conspiracy theories. Because we've been in some deep water tonight, but there are still corners of this ocean we haven't explored. Let me talk about Sleepy Time and what it reveals about the characters' inner lives. Sleepy Time is Season 1, Episode 15A. It aired on January 17th, 2000, and it's the last episode of Season 1 in production order. And it's one of the most revealing episodes the show has ever produced, because it literally takes us inside the characters' subconscious minds. The premise is simple. SpongeBob falls asleep and gains the ability to enter other people's dreams. And what he finds in those dreams tells us more about who these characters really are than any amount of surface-level observation ever could. In Gary's dream, as we discussed earlier, Gary is an intellectual surrounded by books. He reads philosophy. He speaks eloquently. The snail who can only say meow in the waking world is a genius in his dream life. And I keep coming back to what that says about the gap between who we are on the inside and who we appear to be on the outside. Gary isn't just a pet. He's a mind trapped in a body that can't express what it contains. And the only place that mind can be free is in sleep. Which, if you're watching this as you fall asleep, is kind of a beautiful thought, isn't it? The idea that your dream self is your real self. The version of you that exists without limitations. In Squidward's dream, he's performing a clarinet concert to a sold-out audience. They love him. They adore him. He's everything he believes he should be. a celebrated artist, appreciated and admired. And the theory here connects to what we discussed earlier about whether Squidward is actually talented. In his dream, there's no ambiguity. He's brilliant. The audience confirms it. And the fact that this is his dream, the thing his subconscious most desires, tells you that Squidward's frustration isn't with himself. It's with the world for not recognizing what he has to offer. He doesn't dream of becoming talented. He dreams of being recognized for talent he already has. In Patrick's dream, he's riding a kitty horse outside a grocery store. That's it. Just riding back and forth on a mechanical horse, laughing. And some people read this as confirmation that Patrick is simple, that his dreams are as shallow as his waking life. But I actually think there's something more going on. Patrick's dream is the only one in the episode where the dreamer is completely, unreservedly happy. No anxiety, no unfulfilled desires, no gap between reality and aspiration. Patrick doesn't dream of being something he's not because he's perfectly content with what he is. And whether you read that as stupidity or enlightenment says more about you than it does about Patrick. In Mr. Krab's dream, he's fishing for money. Money is literally swimming in the ocean like fish, and Krabs is catching it. And this dream is so perfectly Mr. Krabs that it barely requires analysis. His subconscious desire is the same as his conscious desire, more money. But what I find interesting is the method. He's fishing. He's using effort and skill to acquire wealth. He's not stealing. He's not exploiting. He's fishing. And there's something almost innocent about that. In his dream, the money comes through honest work. No scheming. No underpaying employees. Just a crab on a boat, fishing for dollars. Maybe the version of Mr. Krabs that exists in his subconscious is the version of himself he'd be if he didn't have to compete with plankton, or run a business, or worry about the real-world pressures that turned him into the greedy miser we see in the waking world. Sleepy Time is a production milestone too. It was the last episode conceived using traditional cell animation. After this, the show transitioned to digital ink and paint. So there's a meta reading where this episode, about the transition from waking to sleeping, from one state of consciousness to another, also marks the transition from one era of animation technology to another. The show literally changed how it was made, right at the point where it was exploring the boundary between reality and dreams. I don't think that was intentional, but it's a coincidence that feels meaningful. Alright, here's a theory that I think is really, really underrated. The theory about what SpongeBob SquarePants says about work culture in America. And I'm not talking about the general capitalism theory we already covered. I'm talking specifically about the show's depiction of what it means to be a worker in a service economy. SpongeBob is a fry cook. He works in fast food. He makes minimum wage or less. He has no benefits. He has no retirement plan. He has no path to advancement. And the show, created in 1999, debuted at a moment when the American service economy was becoming the dominant employment sector. More and more people were working jobs exactly like SpongeBob's. Low wage, low prestige, repetitive, physically demanding, and offering almost no upward mobility. And SpongeBob loves it. Now think about what that message communicates to the generation that grew up watching this show. An entire cohort of children was exposed, from a young age, to the idea that loving your menial job is not only possible, but admirable. That the person who flips burgers with joy is morally superior to the person who flips burgers with resentment. That finding meaning in repetitive labor is a virtue. Some theorists have argued that SpongeBob is, whether intentionally or not, propaganda for service economy compliance. It teaches children to be good workers, to accept their station, to find meaning in meaninglessness, to be SpongeBob, not Squidward. Because Squidward, the character who resents his position, who believes he deserves more, who has ambitions beyond his current circumstances, is consistently presented as the butt of the joke. The show doesn't say Squidward is wrong for wanting more, but it does say he's unhappy, and it heavily implies that his unhappiness is his own fault. I have complicated feelings about this reading, because on one hand, there's something genuinely beautiful about SpongeBob's ability to find joy in his work. Not everyone gets to have their dream job. Not everyone gets to be an artist, or a musician, or a scientist. Most people, statistically, end up in jobs that aren't particularly glamorous. And the ability to find satisfaction in that kind of work is a real, valuable, psychologically healthy skill. SpongeBob isn't deluded. He's resilient. But on the other hand, there's a difference between finding meaning in your work and not questioning the systems that determine what kind of work is available to you. SpongeBob never asks why he makes so little money. He never asks why Mr. Krabs gets to keep all the profits. He never asks why the system is structured the way it is. His acceptance is total, and total acceptance, while personally beneficial, can be socially harmful. Because when workers accept exploitation without question, exploitation continues. And SpongeBob's example, his cheerful, uncritical compliance, could be read as modeling the exact behavior that keeps exploitative systems in place. I don't think Hillenberg intended this reading. I think he created a happy character who happens to work in fast food. But intentions don't control interpretations. And the fact that SpongeBob's relationship with his job can support both a positive reading, find joy where you are, and a negative reading, accept exploitation with a smile, is another example of the show's incredible interpretive flexibility. Let me bring up something related that I've been thinking about. The theory about why SpongeBob lives alone. SpongeBob is an adult. He has a job. He pays rent. He has adult responsibilities. And he lives alone, with only his pet snail Gary for company. His parents are alive. We see them occasionally, but they don't live with him. He moved out. He has his own place. And yet he behaves like a child in almost every other respect. He plays with toys. He blows bubbles. He's afraid of the dark. He can't drive. He has a childlike emotional range. The theory is that SpongeBob represents the experience of being a young adult who isn't ready for adulthood. He's got the external trappings of independence, the job, the house, the pet, but internally, he's still a kid. He hasn't developed the emotional maturity, the social sophistication, or the practical skills that full adulthood requires. And the show's refusal to let him grow, its insistence on keeping him perpetually childlike despite living an adult's life, reflects a broader cultural anxiety about delayed adolescence, about 20-somethings who live alone but eat cereal for dinner, about college graduates who work entry-level jobs and spend their weekends playing video games and rewatching cartoons from their childhood. Sound familiar? Because it should. The generation that grew up watching SpongeBob is, in many ways, living SpongeBob's life. Working jobs they're overqualified for. Living in apartments they can barely afford. Finding joy in the small things because the big things feel out of reach. And the fact that SpongeBob, a character created in 1999, perfectly predicted the millennial and Gen Z experience of adulthood, that's either remarkable foresight or remarkable coincidence. Either way, it's one of the reasons the show continues to resonate with audiences who are long past the target age demographic. Okay, I want to talk about one more production-related theory, and it's one that I find both fascinating and a little sad. The theory about why SpongeBob episodes got shorter. In the early seasons, SpongeBob episodes were 11-minute segments, typically aired in pairs of 2 to fill a half-hour time slot. This format allowed the writers to tell tight, focused stories. Every joke mattered. Every scene earned its place. There was no filler. There was no padding. 11 minutes is a brutally efficient format, and the show's best episodes use every second. But as the show continued, and as Nickelodeon expanded the production schedule, the pacing changed. Later seasons have episodes that feel stretched, padded, like they're trying to fill the same 11 minutes with less material. Jokes linger. Scenes go on longer than they need to. The editing is looser. And some fans believe this isn't just a matter of writing quality. They believe it's a deliberate production decision. The theory is that Nickelodeon mandated longer episodes, or more accurately, the same length episodes with less content in order to reduce production costs. More screen time spent on held poses, repeated animation, and extended reaction shots means less new animation to produce, and less new animation means lower costs per episode. The show became cheaper to make, even as it became more profitable. I can't verify this theory from public sources. Animation production budgets are typically confidential, but the observation that later episodes feel more stretched than earlier ones is widely shared among fans, and the economic logic of the theory makes sense. If you can fill the same time slot with fewer unique drawings, you save money. And for a corporation like Nickelodeon, saving money on their most profitable show would be a rational, if creatively destructive, business decision. Now, let me talk about something that connects to the broader SpongeBob fandom and the role conspiracy theories play in keeping the show culturally relevant. The SpongeBob community has been one of the most active animated series fan communities for over 2 decades. Forums like SpongeBuddy Mania, the Encyclopedia SpongeBobia wiki on fandom, the SpongeBob subreddit, and countless Discord servers are filled with fans who analyze, debate, and theorize about the show with a level of intensity that rivals academic literary criticism. And the theories serve a specific function within this community. They keep the show interesting. After you've watched every episode multiple times, after you know all the jokes and all the plot twists and all the character arcs, theories give you a reason to keep watching. They transform passive consumption into active investigation. Every rewatch becomes an opportunity to find evidence. Every scene becomes a potential data point. The show doesn't end when the episode ends. It continues in the analysis, in the debate, in the shared excitement of discovering something new in something old. And I think that's ultimately what conspiracy theories are about. Not just for SpongeBob, but for any piece of media. They're a way of extending the experience. They're a way of keeping a thing you love alive in your mind long after you've finished consuming it. And for a show like SpongeBob, which has been part of people's lives for a quarter of a century, that extension is crucial. It's the difference between a show that was popular and a show that endures. SpongeBob endures because people refuse to stop thinking about it, and the theories are the vehicle for that refusal. Let me bring up one more theory that I think is important. The theory about SpongeBob's regenerative abilities and what they mean. SpongeBob is a sponge, and real sponges have remarkable biological properties. They can regenerate lost body parts. They can survive being torn apart. Some species can be passed through a sieve and reassemble themselves into a functional organism, and the show acknowledges this. SpongeBob's body is malleable. He can be flattened, stretched, torn apart, and exploded, and he always returns to his original shape. His physical resilience is practically infinite. The theory connects this to SpongeBob's emotional resilience. Just as his body can survive any physical trauma, his personality can survive any emotional trauma. He can be insulted, rejected, humiliated, and heartbroken, and he bounces back every time, without fail. And the theory suggests that these two forms of resilience are connected. That SpongeBob's emotional indestructibility isn't just a character trait. It's a biological property. It's what he is. A sponge absorbs everything and returns to its original shape. And SpongeBob absorbs every negative experience and returns to his original state. Happy, enthusiastic, ready. And this is where biology meets philosophy in a way that only SpongeBob can pull off. Because the question the theory raises is this: is SpongeBob's resilience a strength or a limitation? If he can't be permanently affected by negative experiences, can he truly learn? Can he grow? Can he change? Or is he trapped by his own biology, destined to be perpetually optimistic regardless of what happens to him, unable to develop the kind of hard-won wisdom that comes from being permanently changed by pain? It's the same question the show has been asking since the beginning, just framed in biological terms. Is SpongeBob's happiness a choice, or is it a condition? And the answer, I think, is that the show deliberately refuses to answer, because answering would resolve the tension that makes the character interesting. As long as we don't know whether SpongeBob is happy by choice or by nature, we can project our own feelings onto him. The optimists see a character who chooses joy. The cynics see a character who's incapable of anything else. And the show holds space for both. Let me take us to one more theory before we wrap this all up. The theory that SpongeBob is the most rewatchable show ever made, and that this wasn't an accident. This theory argues that Stephen Hillenberg designed SpongeBob SquarePants specifically for rewatching. The density of visual gags, the speed of the dialogue, the layered jokes that work on multiple levels, the background details that you only catch on the second or third viewing. All of these are deliberate design choices that reward repeated viewings. And the theory goes further, suggesting that the show's structure, 11-minute episodes with no overarching plot, paired with its fall asleep to appeal, creates a perfect loop. You can start any episode at any point, watch as many or as few as you want, fall asleep in the middle, and pick up any other episode when you wake up. There's no continuity to track, no plot to follow, just an endless stream of self-contained, rewatchable content. And I think there's real evidence for this. The show's most popular episodes are the ones that get rewatched the most, not necessarily the ones that were most popular on first airing. Band Geeks, Chocolate with Nuts, Pizza Delivery, Graveyard Shift. These episodes have been watched millions of times by the same people. They haven't gotten less funny with repetition. If anything, they've gotten funnier, because every rewatch reveals a visual gag you missed, a background joke you overlooked, a line delivery that you didn't fully appreciate the first time. And this rewatchability is, I think, the main reason SpongeBob became the foundation of meme culture. Memes are born from rewatching. You don't create a meme from something you've seen once. You create a meme from something you've seen so many times that individual frames and expressions have become permanently embedded in your memory. SpongeBob's visual vocabulary, the facial expressions, the body language, the reaction shots, they're so well known because they've been watched so many times. And they've been watched so many times because the show was designed to be watched repeatedly. Whether Hillenberg consciously designed for rewatchability, or whether it's simply a natural consequence of the show's density and quality, the result is the same. SpongeBob SquarePants is a show that gets better the more you watch it. And in an age of streaming, where the entire catalog of episodes is available at any moment, that design philosophy has proven to be incredibly valuable. People don't just watch SpongeBob, they live with it. It's the show that's always there, always available, always ready to be rewatched for the 100th time, and it never gets old. And you know what? That might be the biggest conspiracy of all. That a marine biologist from Oklahoma created a show so densely packed with comedy, so carefully designed for repeated viewing, so perfectly calibrated for the streaming age, 20 years before streaming became the dominant way we consume television. Hillenberg couldn't have known that his show would eventually live on a platform where every episode was infinitely accessible. But the design of the show, the way it rewards rewatching, the way each episode is a perfect self-contained unit that you can drop into at any point, it's almost like the show was built for a future that hadn't arrived yet. Maybe that's the ultimate SpongeBob conspiracy theory. Not that the show is about nuclear testing or deadly sins or purgatory, but that Stephen Hillenberg somehow built a show for a world that didn't exist yet. A show that would find its ultimate audience, not in the kids who watched it on Saturday mornings in 1999, but in the adults who would stream it at 2 in the morning in 2026, lying in bed, unable to sleep, finding comfort in the same yellow sponge that made them laugh when they were 10 years old. If that's not a conspiracy, I don't know what is. Let me also talk about something that I've wanted to address throughout this entire video, and I think now is the right time. The question of whether it's okay to analyze children's media this deeply. Because I know some people watch a video like this and think, it's a kid's show. You're overthinking it. Stop projecting adult themes onto something made for children. And I understand that perspective. I genuinely do. SpongeBob SquarePants is rated TVY7. Its primary audience is children. And the creators, at least consciously, were making content for kids. But here's the thing. The boundary between children's media and adult media is much more porous than we pretend it is. The best children's entertainment has always contained layers that adults can appreciate. That's not a modern innovation. It goes back to fairy tales, which were often violent and morally complex in their original forms. It goes back to Disney, which embedded adult themes and humor in its films from the very beginning. The idea that children's media should only contain children's themes is, I think, a relatively recent and relatively misguided notion. And SpongeBob explicitly rejects that notion. The adult jokes we discussed earlier aren't accidents. They're deliberate. The thematic depth isn't something fans imagined. It's there in the text. Hillenberg didn't make a simple show. He made a sophisticated show that was also accessible to children. And the conspiracy theories, the analysis, the deep dives, they're not overthinking the show. They're responding to the invitation that the show makes every single time it includes a joke that a 5-year-old can't possibly understand, or a thematic layer that only becomes visible with adult experience. So no, I don't think we're overthinking SpongeBob. I think we're thinking about it exactly as much as it deserves. And the fact that it rewards that level of attention is what makes it great. One last thing before we bring it all together. I want to talk about the future of SpongeBob SquarePants and what these conspiracy theories mean for the show's legacy. As of right now, in 2026, SpongeBob has been on the air for 27 years. It's produced over 330 episodes. It's spawned multiple movies and spin-offs, and it shows no signs of stopping. Season 17 has been announced. New content continues to be produced. The franchise is alive, and, commercially at least, thriving. But the Stephen Hillenberg question hangs over everything. What does SpongeBob become without the man who created it? The show has survived his departure before, from 2004 to his return around Season 9B. And it survived, but it changed. The quality declined. The characters flattened. The soul of the show was diminished, if not entirely lost. And now, Hillenberg is gone permanently. He can't come back this time. There will be no second return, no creative renaissance, no course correction from the man who understood SpongeBob better than anyone. And the question of whether the show can maintain its quality, its depth, its relevance without him, is one that I think about a lot. The conspiracy theories offer a kind of answer to this question, because the theories don't depend on new content. They're based on what already exists. The nuclear theory doesn't need new episodes to remain compelling. The 7 Deadly Sins theory works based on the characters as they were created. The depth that fans find in SpongeBob is largely the depth that Hillenberg put there, in those first 3 seasons, in that original creative vision. And no matter what happens to the show going forward, that depth isn't going anywhere. SpongeBob's legacy isn't in the new episodes. It's in the 300+ episodes that already exist. It's in the original creative vision that Stephen Hillenberg brought to life. And the conspiracy theories, the analysis, the deep dives, they're a way of keeping that legacy alive, of continuing to find new things in something that was created decades ago, of refusing to let the show become just another piece of cultural detritus, consumed and forgotten. And I think that's what Hillenberg would want, even if he'd probably be baffled by the specific theories. He'd want people to keep watching, keep thinking, keep finding new things in the world he built, keep laughing at the jokes he wrote, keep caring about the characters he created, because that's why he made the show. Not for merchandise, not for ratings, not for Nickelodeon's bottom line. He made it because he loved the ocean. He loved animation. He loved making people laugh. And the best way to honor that love is to keep engaging with the thing he made. Okay, I think it's time to start bringing this all together. We've been on quite a journey tonight. We've explored theories about nuclear testing, deadly sins, autism, depression, capitalism, drugs, purgatory, secret formulas, hidden adult jokes, production conspiracies, voice actor influence, temporal loops, and more. And if there's one thing I hope you've taken away from all of this, it's that SpongeBob SquarePants is one of the most remarkably constructed pieces of media ever created. Not because it's hiding anything, but because it's open enough, rich enough, and well-crafted enough to sustain any interpretation you bring to it. The theories work because the show works. The analysis holds up because the source material holds up. And 27 years after Stephen Hillenberg pitched a show about a sea sponge to Nickelodeon executives who probably didn't know what to make of it, here we are. 3 hours into a video about a cartoon, still finding new things to say. And I want to tell you something before we go, something personal. I've been working on this video for a long time, and during the process of researching and writing it, I rewatched more SpongeBob than I've watched in years. Dozens of episodes, maybe hundreds. I went back to the beginning. I watched Help Wanted again, and Bubble Stand, and Pizza Delivery, and Band Geeks, and all the episodes I loved as a kid. And what struck me, more than any theory or any hidden meaning, was how the show made me feel. Not smart, not analytical, not like I was uncovering secrets. It just made me feel warm. It made me feel like I was 10 years old again, sitting on the floor in front of the TV, laughing at a yellow sponge who was too happy for his own good. And no conspiracy theory can explain that feeling. No analysis can capture it. It's something the show does to you directly, bypassing your critical brain and going straight to the part of you that remembers what it was like to be a kid. That's SpongeBob's real power, not its depth, not its hidden meanings, its ability to make you feel something genuine. And in a world that's increasingly cynical, increasingly ironic, increasingly suspicious of sincerity, a show that can make you feel genuine uncomplicated joy is more valuable than 1,000 conspiracy theories. I really believe that. And I think that if you've been watching this video, if you've been listening to me talk about nuclear testing and deadly sins and purgatory and capitalism and all the rest of it, and you still feel warm inside when you think about SpongeBob, then the show has done its job. It's survived 3 hours of analysis. It's survived everything I've thrown at it. And it's still standing there in front of his mirror, tying his tie, ready for another day. That's resilience. That's joy. That's SpongeBob. And before we close, I want to circle back to something that I mentioned much earlier in this video, because I think it ties everything together in a way that nothing else can. The question of Stephen Hillenberg's marine biology background and how it fundamentally shaped everything about this show. Hillenberg wasn't just a guy who happened to know some facts about the ocean. He lived the ocean. He studied it for years. He taught children about tide pools and marine ecosystems. He understood the underwater world on a level that most animators simply couldn't match. And when you understand that, when you really sit with the fact that the creator of SpongeBob SquarePants was, first and foremost, a marine scientist, you start to see the show in a completely different light. The way Bikini Bottom is designed reflects real marine environments. The architecture uses real underwater objects, anchors, ship hulls, coral formations. The creatures, despite being anthropomorphized, retain aspects of their real biological identities. SpongeBob absorbs things and regenerates, like a real sponge. Patrick is slow and sedentary, like a real starfish. Squidward has multiple tentacles and moves with a specific fluidity, like a real octopus. Gary meows because snails in this world are the analog of cats, but his shell and physical movement mirror actual gastropod biology. Sandy needs an air dome because she's a land mammal, and the show never forgets that. She can't breathe underwater. That's real science informing cartoon logic. And I think this is why the nuclear theory has so much traction. Because Hillenberg's scientific literacy means that real-world connections to the show aren't far-fetched. They're plausible. A marine biologist setting his cartoon at Bikini Atoll and including mushroom cloud-shaped explosions isn't random nonsense. It's a creator whose scientific knowledge naturally informed his creative choices, whether he intended those connections to carry thematic weight or not. There's a theory I haven't mentioned yet that I want to squeeze in here because I think it's important. The theory about why SpongeBob never ages. We talked about the temporal loop theory and the idea that Bikini Bottom exists in some kind of cyclical time. But there's a simpler biological interpretation. Real sponges don't age the way most organisms do. They don't have a fixed lifespan in the way that mammals or fish do. Some sponge species can live for thousands of years. They don't experience senescence the way we do. They just keep growing, keep filtering, keep existing, potentially forever. And SpongeBob's agelessness in the show might be a reflection of this real biological fact. He doesn't age because sponges don't age. It's not a narrative choice. It's a biological one. The character literally cannot grow old because his species doesn't work that way. And if you apply this reading, it adds a new dimension to the show's refusal to change. SpongeBob can't grow up because he's a sponge. The world around him can't progress because it's built around a creature for whom time is circular, not linear. The show's status quo isn't a storytelling convenience. It's a biological inevitability. And I find that reading much more interesting than the temporal loop theory because it's grounded in the same science that Hillenberg used to build the show in the first place. Similarly, there's a real-world basis for the theory about Patrick's intelligence fluctuating wildly from episode to episode. Some fans have noted that Patrick's cognitive abilities seem to change depending on the episode. Sometimes he's just a little slow. Other times, he makes observations that are genuinely insightful. And occasionally, he's so stupid that he can't function at all. The theory suggests that this inconsistency isn't bad writing. It's a reflection of real starfish biology. Real starfish don't have centralized brains. They have a decentralized nervous system, a nerve ring around their mouth, and nerve cords running through each arm. They process information differently from creatures with centralized brains. And the theory posits that Patrick's fluctuating intelligence reflects this decentralized processing. Some days, his distributed nervous system produces something resembling coherent thought. Other days, it doesn't. His intelligence isn't fixed because his biology doesn't support fixed intelligence. It's variable by design. Again, I don't think the writers sat down and said, Patrick's intelligence should fluctuate because of decentralized starfish neurobiology. But the fact that you can construct this reading, that the show's internal inconsistency can be explained by the real biology of the character's species, is yet another testament to how deeply Hillenberg's scientific background permeated the show's DNA. And this leads me to a thought that I think might be the most important one in this entire video. The reason SpongeBob conspiracy theories are so compelling isn't that the show is hiding dark secrets. It's that the show was built on a foundation of real knowledge. Hillenberg's marine biology background meant that every design choice, every character trait, every aspect of Bikini Bottom's world was informed by genuine scientific understanding. And that scientific foundation creates a richness that pure imagination can't replicate. When a creator knows their subject deeply, when they've studied it and lived with it and taught it to others, that knowledge seeps into everything they make. It creates connections that the creator might not consciously intend, but that exist because the knowledge is there, underlying every choice. And fans, who also live in the real world and have access to the same scientific knowledge, can trace those connections. They can find the nuclear testing link. They can identify the biological properties. They can map the ecological relationships. And the connections they find are real, even if the thematic interpretations they build on those connections are speculative. That's what makes SpongeBob different from other shows that generate conspiracy theories. When people theorize about most shows, they're working with pure fiction. There's nothing to anchor the theories except the text itself. But with SpongeBob, the theories are anchored in science, in real biology, in real history, in real oceanography. And that anchor gives the theories a weight and a plausibility that purely fictional theories can't match. Stephen Hillenberg built SpongeBob SquarePants on a foundation of real knowledge. And the conspiracy theories that have grown from that foundation are, in their own way, a testament to his expertise. He knew the ocean so well that even the hidden layers of his cartoon reflect genuine scientific truth. And 27 years later, people are still discovering those layers, still making connections, still marveling at the depth of what one marine biologist put into a cartoon about a sea sponge. That's not a conspiracy. That's a legacy. And I want to mention one more thing that I've been holding on to, because I think it's the perfect bridge between everything we've discussed tonight and the question of what it all means. There's a scene in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, the 2004 film, that I think about more than any other moment in the franchise. It's the scene where SpongeBob and Patrick are drying out under the heat lamp in Shell City. They're dying, literally dying. Their bodies are desiccating. The moisture is leaving them, and as they dry out, they start to accept their fate. They hold hands, or whatever the sponge and starfish equivalent of holding hands is, and they start to cry. And their tears, the tiny drops of moisture leaving their bodies, slide down and eventually reach the electrical outlet that powers the heat lamp. The tears short-circuit the device. The sprinklers activate, and they're saved. They're literally saved by their own sadness. Their willingness to feel, to cry, to be vulnerable in the face of death is what rescues them. And I've been thinking about that scene in the context of every theory we've discussed tonight, because what it tells you is that in Stephen Hillenberg's world, vulnerability isn't weakness. Sadness isn't failure. The things that make you fragile, your emotions, your attachments, your capacity for grief, those are the same things that save you. SpongeBob and Patrick don't survive Shell City because they're tough or smart or powerful. They survive because they're willing to cry, because they love each other enough to feel the full weight of losing each other. And if there's a single thesis that connects all of SpongeBob's conspiracy theories, all of the darkness people find in it, all of the depth they extract from it, I think it's this. The show is about what it means to feel everything. The joy and the sadness and the anger and the fear and the boredom and the love, all of it, all at once, without filtering and without restraint. SpongeBob feels everything. That's his defining characteristic. Not optimism, not enthusiasm, not naivety. Feeling. He feels the joy of flipping Krabby Patties as intensely as he feels the pain of rejection. He feels the excitement of jellyfishing as deeply as he feels the terror of rock bottom. His emotional range isn't limited. It's infinite, and the show, at its best, asks us to feel with him. The conspiracy theories are, in a way, our attempt to match that emotional range. We look for darkness because we feel darkness. We look for depth because we feel depth. We refuse to accept the show at face value because our own experiences have taught us that nothing is at face value. And SpongeBob, this impossibly open, impossibly vulnerable, impossibly feeling character, invites us to bring all of that to his world. He doesn't judge. He doesn't gatekeep. He doesn't say, "This is a kid's show. Keep your adult feelings out of it." He just says, "I'm ready." And he means it for everything. For the joy and the sorrow and the theories and the analysis and the late night rewatches and the conspiracy theories that keep us talking about him decades after his creation. I'm ready. That might be the most powerful phrase in all of animation. 2 words, a sponge, a smile, and everything that comes after. So here's my final thought, and I want you to sit with this as you're falling asleep, or doing the dishes, or driving, or whatever you're doing while listening to this. We've spent 3 hours talking about what SpongeBob might secretly mean, what it might be hiding, what the creators might have intended, what the theories might reveal. And all of that is interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope at least one theory made you see the show in a new way. But the question I keep coming back to, the one I genuinely don't have an answer to, is this. Does it matter? Does it matter if SpongeBob is secretly about nuclear testing? Does it matter if the characters represent the 7 deadly sins? Does it matter if the show is a commentary on capitalism, or a meditation on suburban loneliness, or a coded message about mental health? Does any of the analysis we've done tonight change what SpongeBob is? And I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I've been thinking about it for weeks, and I still don't know. Part of me believes that analysis deepens appreciation, that understanding a show's layers makes you love it more, that seeing the machinery behind the magic doesn't diminish the magic. It reveals a different kind of magic. But another part of me thinks that SpongeBob was at its best when I wasn't analyzing it at all, when I was just watching, just laughing, just letting a cartoon about a sea sponge be exactly what it was. A cartoon about a sea sponge. And maybe that's the final conspiracy theory. The theory that the best way to experience SpongeBob SquarePants is to stop looking for what it means and just let it be what it is. A show made by a man who loved the ocean. A show about a character who loves his life. A show that has made millions and millions of people happy for over 25 years without asking anything in return except that they sit down, get comfortable, and watch. Stephen Hillenberg created something timeless. Something that works for 5-year-olds and 35-year-olds and everyone in between. Something that's funny and sad and weird and beautiful and dumb and brilliant. Often in the same episode, sometimes in the same scene. And the fact that we can spend 3 hours analyzing it and still feel like we've barely scratched the surface isn't evidence that the show is hiding something. It's evidence that the show is so good, so genuinely, effortlessly good, that it contains multitudes. SpongeBob SquarePants, a show about a sea sponge who lives in a pineapple under the sea. And somehow, against all odds, against all logic, against all the rules about what a children's cartoon is supposed to be, and how long it's supposed to last, and how much it's supposed to mean, it became the most important animated show of its generation. Maybe of any generation. And honestly, I don't know what that means. I don't know what any of it means. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I still don't have an answer that satisfies me. But I know this. Whatever SpongeBob means, whatever it's hiding, whatever secrets are buried underneath the laughter and the optimism, and the pineapple house, and the Krabby Patties, and the jellyfishing, and the bad clarinet music, and the meowing snail, and the underwater campfires, and the memes, whatever is down there at the very bottom, past all the theories and all the analysis and all the late-night speculation, I think Stephen Hillenberg would want us to laugh at it. And if you can't sleep after all of that, well, that's what the next video is for. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. I really mean that. 3 hours is a lot to ask, and the fact that you stuck around means more than you know. If you haven't subscribed, consider doing it. We make these because we love them, and every subscriber makes it possible to keep going. Take care of yourselves. Sleep well if you can. And the next time you see a kitchen sponge, think about what Stephen Hillenberg did with one. Think about the world he built. Think about the joy he created. Think about the theories he never meant to inspire, and the meanings he never meant to hide, and the legacy he never could have predicted. And think about SpongeBob, standing in front of his mirror, tying his tie, grinning that impossible grin, and saying what he says every single morning with complete, unshakable, beautiful sincerity. I'm ready. Good night.